Why is it muted? Muted. God dang it. Mute. Mute, mute, mute. It just did a weird auto thing. Anyway, I was gonna do this really nice little introduction about how the Beatles movie Help is why I played guitar, and the J160E, and so I've got the Southern Jumbo, which is acoustically, visually very similar, but acoustically it's much better. And I'm not gonna capo, but it's just such a beautiful, beautiful thing. If I had nails. I have no nails anymore. Without a capo, this is tough. So much easier if you capo at the second fret. Anyway, let's get the voice where it ought to be and all that fun stuff. Anyway, all my plan was undone by some random setting that has never done that before. But this is my baby. I got this in 99 or 2000, I don't remember. So 24, 25 years ago. And it is a much better instrument now than it was when new. It was very stiff. But Bozeman makes really good acoustics when you find a really nice one. Now, this is a 57 off-axis, not the best way to hear it, but it's just great. And it sounds like the Stones and Beatles and Zeppelin, Well, I can't remember what I was going to play, but anyway, I just love the sound. And it looks ugly. Anyway, we'll put this to the side. Good to see everyone. I assume the sound's okay now that there is sound. Let's see. Let's get to some of the questions. And I'd like to remind everyone of two things. Please, if you ask a question, put some question marks at the beginning of it so it pops out from the chat so I see it more easily. Second of all, please, only ask a question once. I will see it. I will get to it in the order it was asked. So by the later in the chat, I'm going to be like 40 minutes behind. That's just the nature of these things. So if you ask a question and you stick around, I will answer your question. Now, I'm playing around with a different lens setting. So I'm almost at about 20 millimeters right now. So that's about almost 30 with the APS-C thing. Anyway, so I kind of got that YouTube thing going on with the wide thing. If you guys prefer me to be here, I look more natural at this, but, can't do the guitar as well. So this is a little more professional, maybe a little more intimate at the same time. This is kind of casual, and I look a little bit fat with this, but, that's not entirely the lens's fault. So let me know what you guys think about the two different approaches to this. I'm getting deep into the camera stuff and the lenses stuff. I might talk about that later in the chat. Let's see, Sebastian BC77. This is not, I saw earlier questions that were already up. This is not the first question that was asked, but it's the first question that I can put on the screen. Any question previous to this is still here, and I'll get to you very shortly. Hey, Sebastian. He says, when I build a turret board, is it necessary to seal the drilled holes for cables and turrets to avoid moisture getting into the board? Thanks. Love your channel. Not really. In a perfect world, once you made all the drill holes that you are going to make, you would then go in there with a very thin coat of sealant before you apply the turrets. The issue is some sealants, most sealants that I know of, don't like heat. So if you use super glue, you would just have the stinkiest mess in the world once you tried to apply any solder and heat to those turrets. And so I'm not aware of any other sealant that would seal those holes without also reacting poorly, very poorly, to heat. So I imagine since 99% of the amps or more ever made do not seal the holes before they put in the turrets, it's really not a problem. But yes, I can see the ideal approach. Maybe NASA has some method to do this, but we're not sending our amps into space very often. Hey, Dennis, I have no experience with or knowledge of Juke amps. Sorry, I'll pop you on the screen, though, so you don't feel left out. Thank you for being here, Dennis. Hey, Mr. Merrill, what is my favorite circuit to troubleshoot? What amplifiers seem to give you the most satisfaction to repair, restore, refresh? Which problems have I run across that grab my interest? I really like the things that are where I get to kind of flex, like that rusted 67 Bassman. I mean, people thought that was not savable. People thought, oh, they just throw it away or buy a new chassis or, throw away the board and get a new chassis and make something else and call it a Bassman. I feel very proud of the work I did on that. And that 58 Bassman, a very different kind of Bassman from a couple weeks back where everything inside it had been robbed out and what was left that was original was in bad shape. And I was able to make that as it was in 1958. It's kind of a player's amp at that point. So much has been changed, but I really enjoy those kind of things where I'm like, most techs either could not have done it or would have gotten fed up and started taking shortcuts. And I don't take shortcuts. As my favorite circuit to troubleshoot, I would say probably the old JMI AC30s because they're so finicky. And this affects this, and so is it this, or is it this, or is it this other thing? Because it's all this very complicated system, and I really have to use my big brain for those. But I enjoy opportunities to use my big brain, and which problems. I guess that's pretty much the answer to that. Without going on and on, I'm trying not to go on and on. I'm trying to get to as many more. Thank you very much, Martin Reed. Please like and subscribe. Yeah, I've got a thing here. I tell myself I'm supposed to pop this up, and I forget to. So thank you, Martin, for helping me out. And yeah, I mean, that's, it's kind of a joke, but I don't subject you to ads every 3 minutes. And YouTube wants to insert ads in this thing every 3 to 4 minutes for you guys, as many as possible. That's how they make their money. And I don't. So every like helps, every subscribe helps. Hey, Gringo Pig. I got 2 guys from Scotland. That's awesome. Hey, Steve Sanchez, what are my thoughts on UFOs and unidentified aerial phenomena? Thank you very much for the kind words. I have a realistic view of such things. It is a near infinite universe that is billions of years old. And so while the probability of there being other advanced civilizations in the universe is almost, it's extraordinarily high. So on the one hand, the probability of other advanced civilizations possibly capable of intergalactic, going from solar system to solar system is very high at some point. The odds of one of those civilizations existing at the same time as another advanced civilization, if we can call ourselves that, is incredibly, incredibly low. If there's a species or whatever out there that could come from Alpha Centauri to here and just fuck with us, but only really in the last 75 years, odds are if they existed a billion years ago, or will only exist a billion years from now, or existed 3,000 years ago. And there were no UFO reports until basically people started making science fiction B-movies, the Flash Gordon serials and all that. So people never reported UFOs until H.G. Wells and Buster Crabbe put the notion of a flying saucer in their head. And when people thought of aliens as being little green men with flying saucers. People saw flying saucers, and they reported seeing little green men. Later, as our science fiction concepts of spaceships changed, what people reported seeing has changed, and what the aliens look like or what the aliens do has changed. The little green men aliens are much nicer than the ones H.R. Geiger inspired. So I think the odds are very low that would happen, two civilizations existing at the same time. Second of all, that they would come all this way just to do flybys and fuck with us. If they're that advanced, they could observe us without being seen. So I think it's much more likely that there are weather phenomena or lens flares and weather balloons. And, frankly, we are not the only government that has been testing ultra-secret flying craft for the past 50 years. So much easier to let the news think that it was a UFO than to think it was a stealth bomber in 1984 or whatever. Sorry to be a downer. Hey, Jeff Harper. I don't have any thoughts on the new PV amps. I would have very little confidence in them. They were not especially well built when they were built in Meridian, Mississippi, and now that they are being outsourced and the company is no longer something that Hartley PV has his personal name on, I think it's just one more set of investors who have bought a brand and have outsourced someone to make something to sell with that logo. So that I'd love to be wrong. I doubt that I am. I keep looking just to the right of the camera because I'm looking at myself on the screen. I have to have it up so I can make sure that it's tracking me, but I need to put I used to have a little yellow notepad, a little Post-it sticky with a smiley face that I had hanging off the lens cap. I need to redo that because I keep forgetting to look at the lens cap. So I'm either looking at the chat or I'm looking at myself there to make sure I'm in focus, or I'll get distracted to look there in myself in beautiful color. We do the duck face. So, hey, Matthew Roberts, his amp took a big fall on its way, makes high-pitched, uninterrupted microphonic howling, changed tubes, but the problem persists. Next troubleshooting steps, I would suspect that you have a bad ground or a bad solder joint or both. It's possible that you have a jack which is loose and the ground's not being made or the ground's intermittent, or you have a bad solder joint. And if the amp's had that much of a shock, it would not surprise me if just a wire has come slightly loose, might be making a little bit of contact, something crucial. It could be an inexpensive fix. It could be something very simple that a tech would find in 5 minutes and fix 5 minutes later. But that's all the information I can give you theoretically from here. Hey, Jamie Jameson. Thank you very much. I have not auditioned JJ6V6S's, but I have used an awful lot of them and no longer do because they go microphonic in combos. They do not like being vibrated by a speaker. If you have an amp which takes 6V6s and it's a head, so the speakers won't be vibrating the tubes, they can be a good choice. They don't sound exactly like a real 6V6, but they do handle a higher plate and screen current. So on paper, they're a great choice to have a rugged, long-lasting tube that can handle the higher voltages while still sounding kind of close to 6V6. But the reality is, in a combo like a Princeton or a Deluxe Reverb, etc., they become unusable within weeks, and so it's a waste of money. I've had much better luck these days with Electro-Harmonics and tongue saw, depending on the vendor. Hey, thank you, Captain Grumpus. I appreciate that. I'm glad that you're all here, that you make time for this on your Saturdays. I understand there's so many things that want our time, so many things that want our attention. I've got to spend tomorrow doing porch work, so I'd much rather be doing this. So it's an excuse for me to hang out with my friends and talk about amps because, honestly, the other people in my life, if I tell them what I do, they fall asleep. You guys, are my captive guinea pigs. And mwahahaha. Hello from North Central Idaho, DIJ series of numbers. Hey, Ken Jepson. Sorry, Ken Jepson. Robbie F. Oh, that's very nice of you, DIJ. Thank you very much. In 2002, R.J. Keene wrote a paper discussing the nature and use of voltage coefficient distortion, mainly even harmonics and carbon comp resistors. Do I know of this topic? Have I used it in your designs and or repairs? Yeah, I read that article by RG, and I read a whole bunch of stuff RG has written, and the MOSFET Follies gave us a lot of things that people really think are fancy, all from one little paper he did 20 years ago with sketches. 22 years ago now. Damn, I'm old. I've never met RG, but I have a great respect for him. And I think as far as what he's talking about in that paper about harmonics and distortion with carbon comps, he's absolutely right. But there is a trade-off in terms of long-term reliability and low noise. Now, there's a concept that I see all over the internet, including in comments on my videos, where our carbon comps are always noisy. Change those out for metal films. Carbon comps are not always noisy. Some of them are, and any carbon comp is more likely to become noisy than others, but not all. I've got a 68 twin reverb here, and some of the carbon comps did become noisy. I replaced them with new carbon comps that aren't noisy. But most of the resistors in this amp, they're all carbon comps, are still good from 1968. It depends on the heat, humidity, and other factors that they've experienced in their life. So with carbon comps, there can be, in certain parts of the circuit, and I have tested this. I know where I like to use them and where it does not matter. There can be benefits to using them in certain places, like a plate or a slope resistor or a Gridley kind of phase inverter. Some people really like that. But at the same time, there's a risk that might not last. And as the world supply of carbon comps is going to just go within the next year or two, aside from new old stock batches that are going to go way up in price, all the manufacturers that have been making them until the last year or two have stopped making them. So I have a large supply that I will be using only in vintage Fender restorations. And I'm going to cut that off about 67. Everything from 68 later, and every Vox and every Marshall, I'm going to use carbon film, which has very similar characteristics to the carbon comps that RG is talking about, but don't have the downside of noise and reliability. And I find that carbon films in certain places in an amp, to me, do sound better than metal film, but it is a cumulative difference, and you have to really go in there and say, all right, I've got this amp built with like 18 switches, and they've all got carbon films in place. Let me record this, and then with a looper pedal, and then flip this, record it, flip all 18 switches to go to metal films, and then play the same loop, and then listen to them back and forth blind, the recordings. It takes a lot of little differences before you get an audible difference at the output, and it's not always a big difference. Sometimes it is just enough to say, okay, that feels right. When I do this double stop, I get this kind of thing happening that I did not get with a different type of material. You can hear that when Joe was playing that 36 Gibson EH150, and he would do a double stop on that 39 ES 250 and 150 ES 150. There can be a certain magic to that kind of thing, but it is by the nature of carbon composite resistors, which vary so much in their actual value, and their value changes with temperature and humidity. You're always kind of chasing a moving target, so you have to know what you're getting into. Now I'm to where people say that I have no sound. I'm glad that we're past that nightmare. That was an automated thing, and I'm going to do a test stream after this to make sure, with that same sequence, to make sure that doesn't happen again. And when programs do that to me, it drives me nuts. Hey, Martin, do valve dampeners work? Are they just a gimmick? Typically, they're kind of a gimmick, especially in hi-fis where people use them and they buy very expensive valve dampeners for things which are stationary, which are not subject to vibrations. They can help a little bit with certain things. They're not going to stop a truly microphonic tube from being noisy, but they might slightly lessen some microphonics. I'll give you a tip, though. Don't buy audiophile grade tube dampeners. Those are garbage. Go to an auto store and find high temperature silicon O-rings of the suitable diameters for the tubes in question. And you can buy a pack of 4 3/4 inch 700 degree Celsius silicon O-rings for like $1 at AutoZone or wherever. And voila, there's all your 12AX7s or an EL84. And they're so much cheaper because they're not being sold to doctors and lawyers and Indian chiefs who have $4,000 power cables going to their Macintosh. But a dampener is a dampener. And if you want to try it, the automotive O-rings, high temperature ones, are the way to go. Thanks, Matt Johnson. I'm looking forward to hearing this afterwards, see how it actually sounded in the stream. But it records so beautifully. If I was going to really record this, I'd use the Royer R12, positioned about here, aimed right here at about the 14th fret, and I would flip the mic around. It's a figure 8 mic, and the rear of it is less sensitive than the front of it, and that would be a beautiful sound for that kind of stuff. A little out of tune now, and I didn't drop the D down. New strings. What you gonna do? Hey, Elias Theory. Well, you got a 1482 for about $400. You need to spend another $400 to make that thing sound better. And I'm not a huge fan of the 1482. I think they're very kitschy, and Jack White has sold an awful lot of them. But they're just really not well built amps, and there's so much work necessary. The really cheap masonite boards in them that hold all this crazy voltage doubling caps, which are very cheap. Those masonite boards love to break and warp over the years, and the chassis really not much better built than a can of Coca-Cola. And all the hardware gets loose. The reverb tank doesn't sound good when it works. When it stops working, it's pretty much unfixable 99% of the time. And all the input jacks really should be changed out to new switchcraft that shunt to ground. Otherwise, you've got tons of noise on a channel if the volume's not off. They're just really, they were made to be as cheap as possible. And here we are 60 years later trying to keep them going. And you can, but you basically have to rebuild the damn thing. And a lot of the film caps in those things go bad. It's not just the electrolytics. I wouldn't recommend it. Again, Sebastian, flyback diodes are great. I put them on every EL34 amp. I don't put them on every 6L6 or 6V6 amp because they're less likely to be needed, but I put them in every EL34 amp because EL34s, for some reason, are really prone to flyback issues. And it's a no-brainer. If someone's going on a world tour, I don't care what tubes they have, I'm going to do that. And I'll use an R3000 or R5000, depending on the voltage and current, what tubes are there. 3000s for EL84, R5000s for an EL34. Hey, Vinicius. Hola. Hey, Jim A5150. I remember that, the SD3000. Shoot me an email at info@psionicaudio.com, and I'll make SD3000 the subject, and I'll take a look for it. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. Hey, Josh Roberts. Hey, RJ Electric. Jensen recommends pairing a 50-watt amp with a 100-watt speaker. Is this a general rule of thumb, or can some speakers take more abuse? An amplifier's wattage rating, a tube amplifier's wattage rating, is done at the point where the output is still clean, where the output section is capable of reproducing a clean sine wave. There's a video I have up on a Friedman Runt 50, where you can see me discussing this, and that you can see I'm measuring the output. And I believe it was at 52 watts before the output got dirty. That was not at max volume. That was the max clean volume. That's how those tube amps are measured. A tube amp is measured how loud can the output be and still have a clean sine wave. It'll keep going louder than that, but it'll start to square off. A solid-state amplifier, let's avoid modeling, that's a confusion here. A solid-state amplifier, if it's 100 watts, it maxes out at 100 watts, and if you're lucky, it will be clean at 100 watts. If you're unlucky, it'll be clipped at 100 watts, and solid-state clipping typically sounds terrible. I'm not talking about solid-state distortion or in your modeling amps or what your overdrive pedals. I'm talking about the actual behavior of a power amp. And so that's where we get the myth that tube watts are louder. No, watts is watts. And so you have to know what you're measuring. And all this stuff is in the spec. So a 100-watt tube amp is 100 watts at clean output. It'll go louder than that. 100-watt Marshall may have peaks of 120 watts. A AC30 is really about closer to a 45 watt amp. Same thing for a JTM 45, which was marketed as a 45 watt amp. It's really about 33 watts measured clean. So there's the marketing thing with tube amps. So in general, you want to have in at least a 1.5 to 1 ratio. So if you have 100 watts on your amp, you'd want to have at least 150 watts capability for your speakers. If you want more assurance, and Jensen doesn't want to replace speakers or have their speakers blow up, you'll do a 2 to 1 like they're recommending. And there are cases where you say, I'm going to live on the edge. I've got an AC30 and it's got two 15-watt speakers in series, so a total handling of 30 watts, and it's about 33 watts when it's clean, and I push it, and the speakers hold up. Now, the speakers hold up in those amps because a Celestion Alnico Blue or the silver variant are really conservatively rated at that 15 watts. They're closer to a 20-watt amp. But they're right on the verge of it, and you'll notice if you were to go if you talk to Brian May or Edge's Guitar Techs, they go on the road with spare speakers because they do die doing a 2-3 hour concert every night at old stage volumes. Brian May, hope he's okay. I know he had a stroke, but I think he's okay. Brian May, still does that. Edge is all digital now, but for a long time, back when he sounded great, he had very loud AC30s. But those guys can afford to change the speakers. So sometimes you make the choice to say, yeah, I love this deluxe reverb into this Celestion Blue. It's only 15 watts, but I never turn it over 3 or 4. And you're like, I know that I'm running a risk, but I love that sound. So you have to make an educated decision and know that, it's a $300 speaker or a $200 speaker, and it may die. And that may cause damage to the amp if the speaker load goes away. And so you've got to make your calculated risk. Can you afford to have that amp fixed and replace that speaker if necessary in order to get that sound? Hey, Jeff Harper. I'll get to you, Dave 123. I accidentally skipped you. Sorry. What brand tubes do I recommend for an AC15C1? As what it came in as a Chinese. The mod reverb tank I recommended last week sounds a lot better. I'm glad. I thought that mod tank might take care of it for you. I'm glad. It depends on the owner's budget. A good set of JJ ECC 83s and JJ EL 84s from a good vendor will be really good in your AC15C1. If you want to spend more, you can. And you can talk to a tube vendor and ask what they would recommend. The one caveat I would give you is that for V2, the second preamp tube, of the 3 preamp tubes in your amp, it's the one in the middle. That is a cathode follower. And Russian tubes will not like being there. That's Electro-Harmonix, that's Tungsol, that's Mullard reissue, that's Sovtech. Don't put one of those Russian tubes in V2. Use a good Chinese tube, such as a TAD, or use and you can get TAD tubes for the entire amp. There are good Chinese tubes out there. The ones Vox ships with are just generic. Or get a JJ, even if it's just for V2. Pardon me, they really do sound quite good. And the important thing there is not to be punishing your cathode follower tube. And I wish the Russian factories would fix this, but they just cannot handle the higher cathode voltage present in Voxes and in traditional Marshalls. Dave123, who makes the best Princeton reverb clone? I don't know. I've heard a lot of good things from players about Headstrong amps. I've heard some cautionary tales from other techs about Headstrong amps, but I have only seen a photo of the inside of a Headstrong, and from the photo, it looked really pretty good. But I have not had one on my bench to really go through and see what makes it tick, how it's built, and whether I could then recommend it. So if Headstrong Amps wants to send me one, I'd be glad to tell you. I'd love to say, yeah, this thing's the shit. But I think even if they are making really good amps, they don't need that. They've got, Uncle Larry and everyone playing them. So I would say look into Headstrong based on what players are saying, but I cannot recommend them until I have one and can say, yes, this is definitely well built. Sorry, I can't. I wish I could say Fender. Hey, Fountainbird Q. I mentioned cameras, so he'll ask, looking for his first non-phone camera for YouTube stream guitar playing. Have a modestly priced fave. Well, the camera that I use for everything that I do is like the budget entry point for professional cameras. It is the Sony ZV or ZV E10. The Mark I, the original one. And it is really good. It has grown my channel. If you look at when I got it and look at the YouTube videos before that done with my Samsung and iPhones, it's dramatically better. And what you're seeing right now is that camera, and what you've seen in all these videos for the past 2 years is this camera. It's this camera, which is about $600 with a $700 lens. And we're not going to talk about the stands and the lights and all that. It can get expensive. But you can start with some cheap LED panels, like $100 will get you two. I've got one here, just filling in. We turn it off. So there, yeah, it's off, and you can see it goes completely dark here. Just fills it in a little bit. I'm using a Sigma f2.4 18 to 50 millimeter lens, and that's what I use for everything. I got this because it was the best range of things for various shooting needs in an indoor situation. And if I had some ND filters, I could do great things with this outside. So at 50 millimeter, so here's 18 millimeters. Here's 50 millimeters. And typically I would want to be back here and have the light moved. But notice that the exposure has not changed and the focus has not changed. And that's really important about this lens, because it's a prime lens. Even though it's a telephoto, it's a zoom from 18 to 50, which is equivalent to 27 to 75, because it's an APS-C camera, not a full frame. Because it has a constant f-stop, I didn't have to change the focus. I didn't have to change the exposure at all. And it's very flexible. And I can still do the big hands coming at you thing. And the autofocus is fantastic. Now, it has what's called a product placement mode, where you can hold something up and it'll go to it instead of your face as long as it's been held up to the camera. But I don't have that turned on right now. So I have to block my face for it to go in focus, and there it will. Oops. So I'm in focus, the phone's in focus. Sometimes it's fat. I got to block my face faster, sorry. So it works really well, especially if I have the light there. I had it too close. That's why. So, I mean, it's really a good fast autofocus. This is a picture I took in Oxford a couple weeks ago, and that's on my phone now. So I really like this ZV-E10. Now, it is not the world's best camera. It's not a very expensive camera, though. But I'm doing this at 1028, 30 frames per second, and I can stream for hours and hours, though I am on a dummy battery. And I could probably stream for 3 days if I felt like it, and it would never overheat. And all the videos I shoot in 24 frames per second or 30 frames per second are all at 4K. And that's its limit. This one won't go up higher. There's a new version of this, and I'm looking at the newer version of this to add to for an upgrade versus the A6700, maybe even the FX30. But those are, you can get one of these for $600, and it comes for another $100. It has a pretty good kit lens. I got this with a kit lens, and then I got the $700 lens because it makes me able to do the channel. The upgraded version of this is $1,000 without a lens, $1,100 with the lens. The A6700 is $1,400 without a lens, and the FX30 is like $1,800, $1,800 without a lens. So I'm not sure if how far of a plunge I'm going to do, or if I'm going to get another one of these to tide me over with another nice lens, because I could get another one of these and a Sigma 16mm prime f1.8 for the same price as just buying the body of the new version of this. Sorry, Fountainbird asked. So yes, the ZV-E10, the Mark I, is a great choice for what you're trying to do. And later, if you're like, well, that was good, but now I need to go get an A7C or something truly professional, full frame, this will always be a great B cam, and because it will use the same codecs and use the same S-Log and all that stuff. If you want to get into it professionally, it'll match your more expensive camera. The lens is almost more important than the camera, though. Thank you, TD. I'll let me show you guys something real funny, and then I'll get off the camera subject for a little bit, at least. So if I were to bring the iPhone in and put it up kind of close to where this is. Come on. I gotta turn it off and back on. Just a second. I turned it off earlier. Just a second. This is worth it, I promise. General, off, on. All right. So now, come on. Wi-Fi's on. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. All right. So now, this is what the iPhone 13 Pro sees in here, straight out of the camera, with the same professional studio light. It's all color balance, 5600K. This is like the best possible scenario. Every light in here is 5600K. It should not confuse the white balance. But the white balance of the iPhone is terrible, as you can tell. And when you're using it like this, rather than doing it in a photo app, you have no control over the white balance, and the depth of field is off, and it's just crappy in comparison. So this is not much worse than let me put it on the microphone. The new iPhone 16 Pro is not much better than this. And to get one with enough memory, it would cost $1,400. To get another good Sony camera and another good lens costs about the same, $1,400, whichever way I go. So I don't think I'm going to be going to the iPhone anytime soon. Sorry. These are things I think about. These are things I've had to think about. Let me get back to the amp questions for people, though. That's why most of you are here. Elias Theory, they also have a Fender Deluxe Vintage Modified besides the 1402. I'm not sure what a Fender Deluxe Vintage Modified is. If it's like a Deluxe Blues Deluxe or Hot Rod Deluxe, avoid. If it's a Deluxe Reverb you're talking about, might be great, but I don't know that model. Yeah, white balance is everything, Brienne. And it's not difficult. I need to get one of those fancy cards with all the colors to really go to the next level. But I just set it with this $10 thing here. It's got white, but that's not as useful for this. This thing right here, I can set the white balance, which I have, for this. And I've got one setting for this setup. I've got another setting for the playing test over there. And I've got I can create a new third one whenever I need to in about a minute. And the gray card is your friend. I would love to do a chat with all the photography peeps on here. I am doing a video about how I record my videos, about how I make a video. And I'm making that video about how I make videos while also making a video. And so the video about making videos is about making the video that I'm making that I have to, I'm going back and forth, and it's like this whole logical jumble in my head of how to approach this. I'm playing live Inception basically, but I think it's going to be fun when I get it together. Hey, Chris Henline, which amp should every guitar experience? What are my thoughts on amp building kits? Any kits I'd specifically recommend? Every guitar player should experience, I think you mean. I think you should spend time with the Princeton and/or Deluxe Reverb, with and without the reverb engaged. I think every guitarist who wants to play live should spend a lot of time with their prime guitar into a good clean amp, and typically that would be a Fender Princeton or Deluxe Reverb, and turn the reverb off and don't use, set the tone controls to noon, get a moderate clean level like 2 or 3. Don't turn off the reverb, turn off the tremolo. See how many sounds you can get just with your fingers and picks and pickup changes and where along the strings you play. And, Mark Knopfler is the king of that, and it comes across. And you don't have to want to play like Mark Knopfler to do that. I bet Eddie Van Halen would have shown doing that, because he probably spent enough time sitting around doing that. So he knew on stage, hey, and here's how I make it sound like an elephant. That's cool, because he'd found everything he could do with his fingers and his volume knob and an amp. I think that people should spend time with a good Vox and a good Marshall. And by a good Marshall, I'm not being a snob. This is not anti anything else. It's pro. I mean, a 1987, 1959, if you can stand the volume, or a 1962 Bluesbreaker or J-1045, because that is a sound that people don't experience as much as they used to. And it does not sound like what you think it sounds like. If you think it's going to sound like Dokken or Van Halen or Led Zeppelin or Jimi Hendrix, in person, it doesn't. It's much cleaner. It's very hard to control. And I think that the experience, if someone wants to go down into the more aggressive guitar world, to spend some time with an actual fire breather that you've got to stoke the flames. You've got to keep shoveling the coal in. It's not just going to give you infinite sustain just because you turn a knob like a Mesa, which kind of, once you hear a really great amp where you do have to work it, the Mesa people will slag it as like, oh, the electric bumblebee. That's what they're talking about. It sounds cool at first, but the dynamics just aren't there. As far as amp building kits, most people should start off with something really basic like a tube champ. Most people, I don't think, should build amps, because most people are not qualified to build amps, just as I'm not going to build a car and then try to drive it on public streets. But if you wanted to start with a kit, I'd say Mojo Tone's a pretty safe bet. I don't keep up with the entire kit scene. I would specifically avoid Weber. I would say Mojo Tone would be a great place to learn. If you want to do a Stereotone kit, that's very good too, but they tend to be more expensive because people want to do the higher end amps that they offer kits for, which just makes sense. But don't don't spend that money and try to build one unless you've already successfully built maybe 3 more basic amps. Hello, Sam. He's got a Marshall 2204 with no screen grid resistors. Should he add them? Do you mean screen grid or do you mean grid stopper? It's very uncommon for a Marshall to have no screen grid resistors. It's fairly common for a 2204 to be absent 2. Typically be on a 2203 where two of the tubes would have grid stoppers and 2 would not. But it's possible you have a 2204 without grid stoppers. If you mean screen grid resistors, you should definitely add them. You should some 5-watt 1Ks, and I like the Vichy's better. The Vichy low mass ones you see me use in my videos. I think it's the CW it's the AC or PAC series. Much better than the big square white cement ones from like Zycon, because those things can flop around, and much less expensive than the beautiful green omites, ceramides with an enamel coating, because those things are way expensive and have no benefit other than they're pretty. It's been locked away in a box where you don't see them again for another 5 years. Fred Berthiaume says, taking the NASA soldering training many times, no mention ever on sealing circuit boards after installing turrets, as the circuit boards are conformally coated. That makes sense. It depends on the step in production where the conformal coating is done, and if it really does seal under the turret. I don't know, but I bet NASA does. Hey, Wes Chilton. Am I interested in servicing an original untouched 63 Fender Pro amp? Just got it from his dad who bought it new. Well, Todd, I am. I don't know where you're located. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee. Shoot me an email, info@sonicaudio.com. And if the logistics don't work out, I can maybe help you find someone closer to you. I don't know where you're located, Todd. But yes, in theory, I would love to. I've got a 62 concert here ready to go home this Wednesday. Hey, the Jameson in Nashville. My opinion about JMI branded AC30 clones. Someone bought the rights to use JMI or just did it, and as far as I know, that's no longer a thing that's happening, but it was happening for a while. I have not experienced any of them, but I've seen pictures, and I would not have bought what I saw pictures of. Hey, Eric in Kentucky. Recently bought a new Hot Rod Blues Deluxe. Probably should have done his research, but the question is, instead of using an attenuator, volume pots be better to replace. There's a lot of misinformation about the Hot Rod and Blues Deluxe volume pots out there. People are like, on the forums will always tell you, replace your linear taper volume pots with audio taper. They're already audio taper. There are things that a tech can do, because if you look at that circuit, it's not just a volume pot, it's a volume pot with a series resistor in front of it. And so the value of that series resistor in conjunction with that volume pot sets the maximum gain possible. You can increase that, and you can decrease the overall volume. You can. There's also a resistor between the wiper and ground, and you can decrease that and affect the taper of that pot. But the best things to do, and none of which are permanent, instead of having 12AX7, 12AX7, 12X7, have 12AY7, 12AX7, 12AT7. That's going to give you a lot more headroom in the preamp, a lot more range of that volume pot. The AT7 is going to give you a much cleaner, more neutral output. It's going to be a little less raggedy. And then we talked about this in the last chat. There are a lot of boxes out there with a volume pot and two jacks that you plug into the effects loop of your Hot Rod or your Deluxe, your Blues Deluxe, and that gives you a master volume, which makes the amp much more usable in most stages. And it gives you, in conjunction with the preamp volume, you can really dial it in. And those can be very inexpensive. I would, if you're not capable of drilling a box and putting in pots and wiring it up yourself, I would say JHS Pedals sells a version that's not expensive, and JHS makes good stuff, and you know that if you have a problem with it, they'll still be in business 3 years from now. So, hey, RJ Electric, TAD advertises some double micas. I've not seen the TAD double micas. I know JJ's got a new double mica 6v6, but I have not tried either. I will look for the TAD as well. Hey, Chris McKinney, any recommendations for interesting Stratocaster wiring? I basically only play boring worship stuff, but I'm restoring an 82 standard Strat. I've got some videos on how my Strats are wired up on the channel. My EJ is wired fairly traditionally. However, I have done two things to it that I recommend to all Strat players. Number one, it has the second tone control is on the bridge pickup, not the middle. So I've got tone for neck middle and tone for bridge middle. And that second tone control uses a smaller value cap than a different value cap. So they're not at the same. I don't remember which one I use right now, but traditionally it's just like a 0.1 for everything. I changed those out. It's in the videos. The second thing I did is it's like the 50s wiring mod for Gibson, where instead of having the tone circuit connected to the input coming from each pickup, from the pickups, it's connected to the wiper of the volume pot, which means that as I don't need a treble bleed, so as I roll the volume back, the sound stays natural. It's a very simple thing to do, and I showed that in one of those videos. On my more modern Strat, I did a trickier thing. Let me take you off the screen so that people can see. Sorry. Let's see. I've got a standard 5-way, nothing special. So I have, and I did the same thing, except this is a global tone control. It still has the 50s thing where the whole tone control is connected to the wiper on the volume. So volume, master volume, master tone, 5-way switch. This pulls up, splits the bridge pickup. This won't apply to an old Strat, but instead of going between, it's not coil tapping, it's splitting this from series to parallel, which makes it sound like a big single coil. It doesn't have the big volume drop you get with series, and makes it sound more like a Strat bridge pickup than a tapped humbucker does. I like that a lot. It's a little bit tricky to go to that mode because you got to pull it out with your fingernail, basically. But if you're playing and you want to go, I want to lead, so fast. The other thing I did is I used a blend pot, and this is something you can do on your guitar. So if I'm here in the bridge pickup position, I've got the blend on 10. There's no neck pickup being blended in, but as I turn that down, it gradually brings in the neck pickup. So at 1, minimum here, I've got the neck pickup and the bridge pickup. I can also go all the way in between, or I can have these two pickups and then blend in the neck as well, which gives me all 3 pickups or variations thereof. That's a really nice feature for a lot of players to have. So if you have that and hang the whole tone circuit on the wiper of the volume pot rather than the input, that's pretty much all you need to do. That and shielding and very good solder joints and the right taper pots and good quality pots. Hey, Brad. Good morning. Yeah, we'll get to lenses now that Brad's here. Brad's my camera buddy. Hey, Jim B. He's getting super curious. Well, I'm not gonna shame you for that, but I would say that if you're super curious, you either need to buy something made before 1970, or you need to save your pennies and get it done right. By my buddy. Who does the Jimmy Page Dragon thing? That's that. What is that amp called? Anyway, the company that is called Supro today has nothing to do with Supro, and their amps range from the pretty bad to the terrible, and just avoid them. It is one of those things where some investors bought the brand and had someone offshore make some amps for them. The Sun Dragon, Mitch Colby offers the Sun Dragon, the Jimmy Page model, but they have a production version, and it is a really great version of the old Supro. But the current stuff made by Supro, not so Supro. Let's see. Well, Robbie F., I like saving them, and I like restoring one or just doing work on one that has, I love the ones that are like, wow, this looks like it could be a reissue, because you don't see that many of them. And I love saving them. From a satisfaction sense, I guess it's the saving. But on an immaculate one, like an old high watt. If I get I've had high watts from like 69 to 72 in that Harry James has done, and I've had to make changes or replace things. I'm like, okay, well, not Harry James, Harry Joyce set the bar like right here. It doesn't go any higher, and I can't work here, and I can't work here, and I can't work here, or I can't even work here. I've got to make my stuff almost indistinguishable. Maybe it's here in certain lights, and it's here. I do like that challenge. I don't get that kind of challenge very often, because there aren't a lot of early high watt DR104s, et cetera, floating around Memphis. But I've had a few. Hey, Don Spencer, thank you so much. What amp would I recommend for replacing his old Carvin Legacy? Plays hard rock, old school metal. I would look at I'm just remembering earlier when someone asked about Princeton builds, did I recommend the right thing? Okay, yeah, I did. I said head first then. Right now I'm going to say headstrong. I'd say look at my buddy's Headstrong amps from Australia, and they have distribution in America as well, so it's not some overpriced thing. So Head Fist. My buddy Jason's Head First amps might be a really good choice for you. And then John Suhr, another friend of mine, he's got some amazing amps, a little less towards the metal, a little more towards hard rock, like the Pete Thorne 100. I don't know what your budget is, but I imagine that if you're between a Head First, a Suhr, or also my buddy Dave Friedman, also a little more towards the hard rock than the metal, those would be three places I would point you to. But I don't know, like old school metal to me is JCM 800, and all three of those companies will make you happy. But I don't know what your version of old school metal is. Over a Carvin Legacy, if you plug into a Head First, a Friedman, or a Suhr, you will never, ever think, why did I play the Carvin? You'll never think, I sure did miss that Carvin. It's just like, oh, this is what I've been looking for all this time. But I don't know if you can afford the price of admission. That's not you personally, any of us. Those are some really great companies. And I'm proud to say that Jason Tong, Head First, John Suhr, Suhr Guitars, Dave Friedman, Friedman Amps, are all really good people who also stand behind their product, and they get a good thing to the market. It's not some investment group that bought a brand and is pushing stuff on the market. Let's see. How does it sound if I, instead of one 12-inch speaker, connected very many? I'm not sure what you're asking. Are you saying like if you could have 16 speakers versus one speaker, but the impedance would be the same? Assuming that all the speakers in this question have the same efficiency, the one with 16 speakers would be much, much louder than one speaker because you're moving a lot more air. But I don't know how to do the math for how much louder. It just gets crazy at that point. Sorry. On the subject, Don Spencer, of high gain stuff, hard rock stuff, I should have also mentioned my buddy George Metropolis. Metropolis has some really great stuff. Sorry, not trying to leave anyone out. Also Greg Germino, but Germino's a little less towards the hard rock, a little more towards the classic rock kind of thing. If I'm old, what makes Kimball? What does that make Kimball? He was a junior in high school when I was born. Well, I don't want to speak ill of the elderly, Kimball. So I'm not going to answer that. But you're around for some cool music that the rest of us missed out on. So you got that going for you, which is nice. Hey, Pacific Audio. Hey, JM. Pacific Audio has a 5E3 output transformer with a 12K primary. Most of the 5E3 output transformers seem to have an 8K primary. What, if any, effect does that have? Well, the output section is not going to sound correct. It may sound good to you. It may sound better to you. I would, but if you're putting it if you're building a Tweed Deluxe, it's not going to sound like a Tweed Deluxe. That's a big part of the recipe. I don't know why they would go to 12K. There are output transformers that have like a choice of 5K or 7K or 5K or 8K, and maybe they have one that's 5K, 8K, 12K, and you can find what sounds good to you. There are a lot of variables involved in this. So without trying it, I cannot tell you whether it's better or worse, but I can tell you that it's not going to sound like a 5E3. I have no experience with the Rivera Rock Crusher. Sorry, Surge98. Robbie F. needs to acquire an app that he hopes I will agree to work on. Well, that's flattering. I think the goal for most people would be to acquire an app that never needs a tech, in which, but if you do need a tech, I would be glad to be your tech. Hey, Matthias from Sweden. I hope you're well. What do I think is the problem on his AC30 HX 60 anniversary that was built in England 2017? From the start, it's always had a high hum noise. It is not the tubes. I hope you're still here, Matthias, and that I'm looking at where you asked that question here, and I'm looking at the current chat here. So if you reply, I'll see it. Hopefully you're here. Is yours the anniversary from 2017 that has the added reverb, where it's just the top boost channel with reverb, no normal channel, no vibrato channel? If that's the case, the trick is to disconnect the reverb connection from the, I think it's on the treble pot of the tone stack, and disconnect the reverb return going into where it returns. I think it's blending into the phase inverter. It is a terrible implementation of a reverb circuit in that app, and it just takes all it just adds a ton of mud and a deadness to the top boost channel while also being noisy. So if that's the model that you're talking about, that's the issue. If it's a different anniversary model, and it's so hard for me to keep up with the Vox anniversary models, I would have to see pictures of it, in which case I'd be glad to if you can tell me which model it is, I can look it up, and I might have some more information for you. But if it's the one with reverb, it's the reverb that's the problem, and I've got a video on the channel showing how to undo that. I think we are going to take our first 7-minute break. And Kleber, Kleber P, thank you for the super chat. I will get to your super chat. We'll get to any super chat I've missed. I'll get to every question that I can. We're going to take a 7-minute break first because my cup is empty. and get ourselves a treat. I forgot the volume was on that. Damn it. I saw while having my intermission, people complaining about the intermission. I've seen this before. I'm like, oh, intermission. I give 3 hours. Sometimes I go a little bit longer. I think 2 7-minute intermissions in the midst of a 3-hour free stream is not too much to ask. Sometimes I get a cup of coffee. Sometimes I take a leak. Sometimes I go out and have a think stick. Sometimes I do all 3. It's my Saturday too, you know. But I also think it's good because you know that if it's coming up a 7-minute break at the top of the hour, you can say, I know I'll wait just a minute, then I'll run and get a sandwich, or I'll do whatever you need to do. Yeah, you got to pay the coffee rent. Exactly. All right, let's get back to the stream. Let me take the nagging thing off about the... I thought I had a different message on. Do I have the same message for both things? I thought I had a different one here. I have to get more creative. Huh. I got a different one for the last one, but I need to gotta get more creative. Sorry. Hard to get back in because this is an artificial thing that I do, you know. From my perspective, I'm not hearing any difference. I'm just talking to my little magic box, and it's hard to get back into that mindset. Outside, neighbors are having a block party on the next block over, and there's a band playing all Stax music out there with a horn section. So they're just doing soul fingers. So I'm kind of like, well, it's been a nice live stream, but I'm going to go see if they got a keg. Let's see, where were we? Matthias, did you reply since the beginning of the break? No. So I don't know which AC30 anniversary you have, but if you can reply on that, I will, hey, Hal, I will get back to that. Hey, Emmett Otter. Let's see. Silverface Super Reverb, Milo316 says, seems to be a good value. How would you tame the volume? Pull one of the power tubes? Never pull one power tube. Use an attenuator or something else. There are many late 70s Super Reverbs which have a built-in master volume, which once you disconnect the stupid bright cap is a very good master volume. Never pull one of 2 power tubes. Never pull one of 4 power tubes, or never pull 2. You can sometimes pull 2 of 4 power tubes if you're pulling one pair. So you're going from 4 tubes, 2 per side to just 1 per side. But a Super Reverb, like most amps, are push-pull amps. So one tube is doing half the waveform, the other tube is doing the other half of the waveform. And if only one tube's there, you're going to have a huge volume drop. You think, okay, I'm onto something. But you're also going to have tons of distortion and a really bad sound. Not the recipe for tone. Now, Edward Van Halen fucked with a lot of people by saying that he would always pull one tube from his Marshall. And that's total bullshit because he got tired of doing interviews and he started making stuff up. And lots of people tried that and they sounded like ass. Not like Van Halen 2. But yeah, if you really need to have that, you can use a speaker attenuator, a good quality one, or you can, buy a later 70s master volume version Super Reverb, or you can just say, well, it's too loud on 3, I'll turn it down to 2. Still sounds good. You're right, Wallpaper Music. You're like old man. Hey, Tony Fleming. He's been installing the double micas in his custom combo repairs. So far, he's held up fine. Good to know. Thank you. I will be trying them, but the vendor that I use has not gotten them yet. And I like to stay with a good vendor rather than chase tubes because I've tried that in the past and it's always bitten me in the butt. But I'll bear that in mind, Tony. Thank you for the information, the feedback. Hey, Joshua Stevens. Hey, mountains ski skate. Thoughts on the build quality and sound of a Trainer YCV20WR? Thank you very much for your kind comments. I have not tried that model, and it's hard for me to keep track of all the Trainer models. I love the Bassmasters especially, but I don't know or have any experience with that one. And yes, please, if you're going to have questions, guys, I don't know why I put things in the descriptions of videos. No one ever reads them. Please put question marks at the beginning of your question so it pops up from the chat. And please only ask a question once. It makes it easier for me to know where I'm at in the chat. Hey, Alan, is there any hope in finding a good tube amp for us that can't spend $5,000 on one, or $5K, or whatever currency you have, with good bedroom level volumes? Yeah, you can get a used Princeton Reverb for about $1,000. You can get a used Swart Atomic Space Tone Junior for about $800. Sometimes you can get a Vox AC15 C1 or C1X, used for between $400 and $700, has a master volume. There are a lot of really good tube amps that don't cost a ton of money, especially for home bedroom use. There's also the very viable choice these days for home use of getting an HX Stomp or a Tonex situation going into your computer or headphones. There are a lot of ways to skin that particular cat, but I think if you want a tube amp, anything under 20 watts, particularly if it has a master volume, can be a good choice. It depends on what you're playing. If you're playing metal, you may be happier with, say, like a Friedman Runt 20 with the master volume. And that's hard rock as the amp does it. And then with metal, you'd add a pedal, and you'd probably love the Friedman BE pedal. But beyond that, without knowing how you play, what your guitars are, what music you love, I can't necessarily give any more information. But $5K is, if it's in American dollars, is very high. If you're talking a different currency, I need to know what that currency is and what the American equivalent is. Sorry. Hey, Peter Mancuso. Hey, Wes Chilton. I'm glad the 1481 is working well. I don't remember which model that is. The 1482 I know very well. They've got some that don't have any power transformers. Those things should not be sold to humans. But I'm glad he likes it. But you also are qualified to do that work for him. And as I said on the 1482 discussion, if you buy one for $400, it's not unreasonable to expect to have to spend another $400 to make it playable. Thank you very much. I've really worked on the volume and the sound in general and flexibility, and I think I'm getting there. There are occasional crispy bits when I listen back. I won't know if I've really solved that until I listen back. And I've got to remember not to get very loud when I'm up close on the microphone like this. I've got to be a little bit aware, and I try to, if I'm going to be loud, I try to make sure I'm not aimed at the mic. Mic technique is very important. If any of you out there sing and you see all those guys on stage and they're holding their 57 like this, they're going to sound like shit because they're blocking the rear vents. You always want to hold it like that. And you don't need to be right up on it. Don't eat the mic. That's a bad thing to do. And it's okay to be off axis to 57. Has a big pickup range. I can be all over here and sound natural. And it'll get louder if I get in closer. And that's a cool thing. Sorry, off-topic rants. Oh, my God, I love you. Thank you, sweetheart.
Got it?
Yes. Oh, my God, what's your name? My name is Lyle. I mean, seriously, you can do this if you want to. It sounds so cool. Do the old Michael Stipe thing. Let's see. Hey, Peter Mancuso, he's looking at purchasing a 70s Marshall cab With original greenbacks, anything he should look out for. Make sure that the speaker hardware is all tight. And look and make sure the cones don't have any holes in them or bad patches or tears. Make sure that the hardware holding the cabinet itself together is still tight. A lot of 4x12 Marshalls have got a wooden post between the center front and the back, and that sometimes is glued in place. It's very common for that glue to come loose. That's not always a deal breaker. It can be fixed. Just look for structural oddities in the wood. Make sure the wood's all in good shape, and use common sense beyond that. I don't know how to tell you how to look to make sure that the original greenbacks really are original. I'm not a speaker expert on that level, but there are plenty of guys out there who are, and probably websites out there just on how to recognize whether such things are original. Hey, David S. Yeah, bucking transformers make a lot of sense. If you can wire up a bucking transformer, go for it. But that's all in a nutshell. That's what the brown box is. It's just an intelligently controlled bucking transformer. If it's 117 instead of 120, I wouldn't worry about it so much. Typically, you're not going to have a problem, with amps seeing 120 instead of 117. The issue is when you have an older amp that really wants 110, 112, 114. That's when 120, and sometimes it gets higher. Right now, the wall voltage in Memphis is 115. Other days, maybe 127. So that's where you might want to have such a thing. I wouldn't worry about 117 to 120 though. Pardon me. Will using Tonex playing through my Fishman Loudbox amplifier risk damaging the amp or speaker? Asked Street Dog. No, I didn't skip your question. I just hadn't gotten to your question yet. I don't think so. I don't know that it's going to sound that great if you're going to the input of the Loudbox. If the Loudbox has an effects loop, so you're just going Tonex into the effects loop of the Fishman. I don't know whether it has a master volume after that or not. It should be fine. The only issue I'd say is if the Fishman Loudbox has got a piezo, that might ruin the sound no matter what you do with the Tonex. So that would not be my first choice for a full frequency flat response setup, because the Loudbox, if it's the models with a piezo, they're never going to be flat frequencies. I loathe piezo pickups. I've had the tweeter sucks for electric guitar. You'll spend your time fighting it. So find a different solution. But in the meantime, it's unlikely to do any damage. Man, every bass amp that comes in that's got a tweeter, I show the guy, you don't actually need this. 90% of the time, tweeters just make things sound terrible, and people don't even realize it. Tweeters and horns, man. Tweeters and horns. Piezo. Why are you laughing at me, Brad? Piezo. Pezzo. Whatever you want to call it. Let's see, where were we? Yeah, Alan, did I miss your previous question? Let's see. I guess you're asking about inexpensive apps, but I don't see the original question. I certainly didn't mean to skip you. If you're looking for new inexpensive apps, there are a lot of things flooding the market that don't cost very much. A lot of them are kind of terrible. You get what you pay for. Piezo. No one else wants to sound like a damn Australian, Brad. Piezo. It's piezo. Piezo. there are a lot of companies just throwing stuff at the wall to see what will stick. And there's a reason out of all the amps under $1,000 that are out there, my video had like, what, 5, 7? And aside from maybe the PRS HRDX20, which I have not tried yet or seen in place, piezo, right, Rich, which might be an addition to it. I don't know. Most of the stuff I see out there is just garbage. And as far as not into the Marshall sound or the Vox sound, really, I think a lot of people don't know what the Marshall sound is or what the Vox sound is. They know how it's presented on record. I know that a lot of players are shocked when they really play an AC-15C1. It is, if you're into Zeppelin, it'll do that. If you're into Brad Paisley, it'll do that. If you're into the Beatles, it'll do that. But also, if you always love the sound of Wes Montgomery, it'll do that. If you love Stevie Ray, Riviera Paradise, it'll do that. It won't do metal, but it'll do fairly aggressive rock. You know, Queen with a treble booster, etc. There's more to the Queen sound than that, but you know. I was dreading someone asking this. What do I think of the Jack White Fender collaboration? I don't know because I have not seen inside one. I've noticed that no one is showing how they're built. The concept's nothing new. All right, so got 2 different outputs, 2 different speakers, and the tremolo thing. If they pulled it off and they did a good job, great for them. But given how Fender has been doing things of late, I would not expect great things inside. I understand from seeing people's comments that it's relatively expensive. I've not seen what the price is. I think it is hideous. It is like the Sony Sports Walkman of Fender amplifiers with all that ugly yellow. And any graphic designer who sees it is going to want to puke. And I'm enough down that road that I have the same pukey instinct. $3,000 for that thing? Oh my God. 3,000? No. 1,500 maybe. I'm not a Jack White fan. I don't like the white stripes. And if you love him, that's great. That's all subjective. And I think he's probably a great player. And if you're going to have the opportunity to have an amp from Fender, sure. But why did it have to look like Bumblebee Bukkake? It's terrible looking. And I doubt it's very good. I'd love it. I'd love to be wrong, but hey, 1217, 65 deluxe reverb reissue. Vibrato wouldn't change speeds. Change both cathode bypass caps on the vibrato channel, the same value, and the trim is faster than it used to be, but it works. Yeah. Well, if you change the bypass caps on the vibrato channel, and the trim is faster than it used to be, it's stronger. It tells me that it's possible that one of the 3 caps in the LFO is getting weak, but I don't think that's probably what's going on. I think you're probably hearing a stronger vibrato. So at the faster speeds, it's more apparent because on a lot of Fenders, at the fastest stuff, it gets more subtle. In theory, changing the cathode bypass caps will not change the speed, but if your old caps were failing and the tremolo was weak, especially at the higher speed stuff, it's not going to be as apparent. B, because if it was that weak, maybe it wasn't getting all the way to the cap, so you were getting a slower speed. There are a lot of ways to change the speed of a deluxe reverb or other Fender Opto tremolo. Changing the cathode bypass caps is not usually the way to do it. So I don't think that you've caused a problem. I think you might have revealed an issue. But live with it. See if you can deal with it. You can always slow it down very easily. I've got videos on the channel on that. Thanks, Peter Vipoulis. I appreciate that. It's good to know that I'm helping. Everybody at once. I don't even know why. Let's see where. Let's see. Let's see. Thank you, Peter. Appreciate that. It's very kind of you. I love that Femmes record. Nikki and I were listening to them the other day. All four of the songs that mean something to me, but those four songs hit hard. Let's see. I don't think that the Jack White amp does look lovely. I think it's one of the ugliest amps to ever come out. I mean, visual language is a thing. Design language is a thing, and they just all over it. Maybe it's Jack White playing a joke. See how many blues lawyers buy that thing. Let's see. Thank you, Brian R. Meta Convos it's hard not for me to just go meta, and I spend most of my time here breaking the fourth wall. So let's see. People talking about the thing, the Jack White thing. See ya, Matthias. Well, you asked the same question, but I have not seen the. Okay, I don't know if it's which model it is. Hopefully, you heard what I said earlier. Let's see what Jake Ferguson, Audio Guild amp. I don't know anything about an Audio Guild. I've not heard of that. Sorry. I hope that you can find someone if you need help with it. But I've not ever heard of that. Yeah, some of the lyrics on the Femmes album, others are good. Not everything from 1980 holds up in any direction. There are a lot of things that we grew up saying on the playground without any malice that just, are not anything to be said these days. And I think that's for the best. Let's see. Taming Super Reverb question posted earlier. What about a 5Y3, 6V6 tubes and only running two? No. Oh my God. A 5Y3 won't last in Super Reverb. The B plus is too high. A 5Y3 can only handle what? 350 volts, 320 volts. So that'll die. 6V6s will not be happy with that load. They're not going to sound good. You can, depending on what speakers you have in Super Reverb, you could pull two of them and have a 4 ohm load versus a 2 ohm load. You just need to make sure that the speakers are rated so that two of them can handle 65, 70 watts. You don't want to have two 20-watt speakers connected, or one of them will die. So you can disconnect two speakers. Just as with a Vibrolux, you can disconnect one speaker. The mismatch can help you as long as the remaining speakers can handle the output of the amp without dying. I see that AES is now selling matched preamp tubes in a guitar amp. Would there be any application where matching is critical? Thanks. No, not at all. Matching in a guitar amplifier is both pointless and in a stereo situation where there might be some value to it. 6 months later, will they still be matched? Probably not. 6 weeks later, 6 days later, will they still be matched? You can chase all kinds of things. Permanent Waves holds up really well, SVT 4001, but that's an entirely different subject. I think tube matching is just a way to sell overpriced tubes, the same way the cryogenic thing is, or the Gold Lion stuff, which is just a relabeled Chinese tube or Russian tube. People will pay an extra $80 for a black box with gold print. Hey, Dave Hudson, lenses are more important than cameras, like tripods that last for decades. Good glass is king. Yeah, I have come to know that more and more. And that's why I was, when he was asking about kind of entry-level cameras, I still recommend the current Mark I ZVE 10 because it's really good. And you can then spend the extra money on good lenses, and you will need other things, This is the tripod I started with. This little tripod I started with, Indurax. Really flimsy, really rattly. It's been relegated to a B cam when I used to have an iPhone. This is not a Manfrotto or anything fancy, but it is a small rig, much sturdier. I could suspend a sandbag from it, and I've got a good swivel head, and it can tilt it and do all kinds of stuff. It's still not a fluid head. All that's to come in the future. But, this it's like $120 versus $20. You can see the two C-stands back there. That's another $250 right there. This one to do the bench camera. The other one is holding up the big $120, $140, 120-watt light up there with its matching $50 parabola, the Chinese lantern kind of thing. And then I've got another 120-watt light right here. You can see my hands lit up, with its big parabolic. All these things add up. And this microphone, this inexpensive Shure microphone, is on an $80 stand, which costs as much as the microphone, with a $12 shock mount and a $7 windscreen. And so when you're going into this, you think, all I need is this. And all I need is this stapler and this chair and this phone. It adds up. So lenses, you got a budget for lenses because the kit lens with any of these cameras is usable, but not great. And the iPhone, they'll spend all this money selling you on iPhone video. And then you actually look at it and you're like, oh, man, no. So you're absolutely right, David. Let's see. Do I prefer speakers with breakup? No, I prefer pizza or ice cream with breakups. I'm kidding. She brings me coffee. Never going to happen. Got a great deal on a 200-watt Fane and a Forte 3D cab. I think I really like the clean and tight response. Well, that's one of the great flavors out there, is a big, efficient, clean speaker. And there's nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with having something that's just kind of on the edge either. It's salt and pepper. You can't say one's better than the other. You got to have the right amount of each. Yeah, I love permanent waves too, Wes. Later in the chat, when I get to those questions, we'll talk about cameras and Rush. I think Neil would have liked that. People say that I sound like Neil Peart. Now, that's a huge compliment, but he's Canadian, so I don't think that there's much progress on that front. We don't have at all similarities other than we're both baritones, and we say strange things from the perspective of most people. If I'm going to build a deluxe reverb amp, is it worth it to spend the extra money on Mercury transformers? Yes and no, Doug, in that Mercury makes fantastic stuff. And if I were building a deluxe reverb and I wanted to use Mercury, I absolutely would. But I also get dealer pricing, so I'm not paying $300 for an output transformer, which is what you would pay. They do relatively small scale. It's really nice stuff, though. I would recommend most people just go to Habor, which is sold through Mojotone. It's the easiest way for you to get that. Or go to Hammond. And you're not going to hear any great difference. If you had 4 different manufacturers' output transformers, you'd have 4 slightly different sounds. I mean, I've got a video up with the 63 AC30 comparing, or it might have been a 62. Anyway, comparing an original Woden to an original Haddon, and which one was going to go in that amp because the amp needed a new one, and they sounded different. Which one's better? Let's see. Brienne was gifted in '04 PV Delta Blues that sat disused for a bit. It's been worked on before, and previous techs soldered the jumpers. Would it be worth changing those out for stranded wires? If you have the ability to do that, Brianna, it would be worth it because those jumper wires are terrible, and they do come loose. That said, if they were properly resoldered, they're probably okay. And the issue is it's a big process, and it's also how the whole thing structurally is held in place. So I'm not sure. I've not done that, so I'm not sure if you'd lose any structural support doing that. I don't think so. But yeah, if you can do the work without damaging any of the pads or traces, I would highly recommend that. While you're in there on a Delta Blues, there's some 5-watt cement resistors, especially 2 of them down towards the end where the power switch is, that just toast the board. So replace those. The tech gobs solder across a broken bit in the middle. Oh, I feel for you. Brian, no. You can replace it with 22 gauge bus wire, or you can replace it with 22 gauge stranded wire if you're very good at it. I do think it would be a good idea to do. I've had those things arc. But yeah, change out the cement resistors, and in the Delta Blues, only 2 of the output tubes have screen grid resistors, and they're only 100 ohms. And I have done, and Brad has done, a mod where you cut traces, and then each output tube gets its own 1K 2-watt screen grid resistor. And Brad, if you can put a link to yours, because I can't do that right now. Brad has the same information that I have. Brad's Guitar Garage there. And it's a fairly simple thing to do. All you really need to do it, I mean, a Dremel makes life easy, a Dremel with a little cutting bit, but you can also do it with a sharp new utility blade and a little bit of patience. You just need to cut 2 traces, and then you're good to go. It would take you about 2 hours, maybe, for the average person to do. If you're going to replace all the wires, it'll take you longer, but just the ones that the previous tech messed up, plus all this, it'd be pretty easy. And you'd be looking at, if you change all the resistors I'm talking about as well, you're looking at $10 in parts, including shipping. I don't have any opinion on Rivera Fandango's Tag Gay. In general, Rivera does good stuff. That's right. Brad has got a whole PCB for the Classic 30. So Brienne, talk to Brad and see if he'd send you one. That would be the Classic 30. Does yours work on the Delta King as well, Brad? Anyway, that's a huge upgrade. I have no experience with a Fandango. In general, Rivera amps are very good. I would say play it. And if it sounds right to you, $600 is a really good price for the quality that he builds. Hey, Natas, would a solid-state Marshall mini stack impedance mismatch from 16 to 8 ohm speaker cabs be okay, or would it be like for 2 bits? When it comes to solid-state stuff, you get a very different output if you have a different impedance. Rule of thumb: if it was designed for X, use X, or you may prefer it with Y, but you need to go in there knowing stuff. You're probably okay 16 to 8, but you don't want to do anything radically different. Okay, yeah, the JJ double mic is. Yeah, I just haven't tried the JJs yet. Sorry you got the Lumix, man. Focus pulsing is what's for dinner. Yeah, I mean, you can't all be cool like me. It has to be in the light, though. So that's instant, pretty much, as long as I block my eyes. That's not. Because it's a light thing, too. I'm not sure if it's not just contrast, but it is really good. Sorry you ain't got that. Let's see. Brian says, yeah, I remember Hartley demanded the Classic 30s be made for under $300 US dollars, and that explains a ton. Yeah, I know the guy who was one of the 2 people tasked with bringing the Hot Rod Deluxe to the market for Fender. because Peavey had taken so many Fender sales at the time with the Classic 50 and Classic 30, which looked like a vintage amp, sounded really good, and cost very little money. So this guy was told by the head honchos at Fender, we need to have something that beats the hot rod, that beats the Classic 50 on the market. So they had 6 months to come up with the classic, with what turned out to be the Hot Rod Deluxe, and it had to cost Fender $350 to make in 1992, whatever it was. And so you get what they don't pay for. But when you're saying, this is what the marketing says we need, and you can only spend this much, you don't get something great. You don't. Maybe occasionally something you get. Once in a generation, you get a Volkswagen Beetle. The rest of the time, do I know of any JTM type of amp with a spring reverb? I can't really think of one. There are Marshalls which have reverb, but I can't think of one where it's really good. I don't think a Marshall style amp needs reverb. I think, if anything, that is where you want a delay that's got some character run into the front of it. Before you say, "Oh, I need an effects loop and all that," I'm not saying you talk like that. Listen to Jimmy Page. He did a lot of cool stuff live with a maestro into the front of his Marshalls. Hell, everything Andy Summers did live was an Echoplex or two into the front of a Marshall set, semi-clean. Andy Summers was not as clean live as people think. The records are JC 120s and Fender Twins, but the live stuff was Marshall, and you can hear it. Hey, Gustavo, he's thinking of doing a treble bleed with a series configuration cap and a resistor, but how do I go about finding the right levels? Well, you can do a whole bunch of math. The easiest thing to do is just to get a whole bunch of resistors and caps and tack solder them until you find what you like the sound of. And if you like, hey, if I change this, if I leave this resistor but change this cap, try these 5 different caps, how does the sound change? Now of those, here's the cap I like the best. Now I'm going to change that resistor in both directions. See which one, don't go blind. Come up with a system. It's almost faster just to tack solder things and try things than to sit down and do math. Because in order to do the math for it, do a whole bunch of math, not meth. Very different. Math. It takes longer to learn what the math should be sometimes than it does just to try things. And caps and resistors is cheap stuff. Or you can just see, you can do what other people do. You can say, all right, that's the Suhr one, and that's the Gibson one, and that's the Lalo one, and that's the Suhr one, and that's that's the Duncan one, and just try all these things that have been published and see which one you like. Or you can just do a whole bunch of meth, in which case you won't care if your volume gets dark. It'll match your teeth. Favorite amp from Marshall Clean Tone that isn't super loud? 1974X, followed by AC15, the current version. You'd be surprised how similar the top boost channel in AC15 is to the Marshall, classic Marshall channel. It's 90% the same. That 10% difference is a big difference, but in terms of that clean sound, check out the video I've got here called Tone Hang with Steve. It's Steve Selvage, great player, 335 straight into a very slightly modded AC15 C1, but the stock one will be similar in a lot of ways as far as what you're talking about. And with a master volume, and you can get them used for $400. Do I have a preference for current production in 6v6 GT? I've been using Electro Harmonics lately, Brienne, and Electro Harmonics and I have not had the best track record across all their tubes, but their current 7025s and the current 6v6 GTs have been very good. Notice I say 7025s, so those are the ones with silver print. The ones with yellow print that just say 12x7, about 60% of them just tend to be garbage, noisy, unreliable garbage. Apparently, all the good ones get the silver ink after testing and are sold for $2 more as a 7025. And the ones that fail QC get the yellow ink and are just pushed out on the market as a 12VX7. Let's see. I missed a question, apparently. Okay. Audio Guild, Magnetone. Thanks, Gooden. Appreciate it. Thanks for that. Thanks for that information about Audio Guild amps, Gooden. Yeah, Merrill, Germino, Greg makes fantastic stuff. Just the early question was not just classic rock, but hard rock, old metal. And that's not really. You can do it with a Germino, but that's not really what those amps are designed for. When I think of Germino, I'm thinking if you wanted to do something from like Terry Kath to early ZZ Top to Zeppelin, maybe pushing Van Halen 1 or Hemispheres by Rush. That's about where I see the Germino kind of, unless Germino's got a more modern amp that I've not run into. And there's nothing wrong with that 68 through 78 period. The 1974X is the 18-watt Marshall T777. It's 18-watt Marshall. It's got tremolo on one channel and not tremolo on the other. And it's a really good sounding little 18-watt Marshall. The 20-watt, is it the 6100, is also a really nice amp. I went to a 50th birthday party last night where the birthday boy received an Epiphone Firebird from his wife. All our significant others need to up their game. Well, I get coffee, and I don't have to change the bridge on this, unlike an Epiphone Firebird. So, hey, Claber P. Thanks for an excellent channel. Thank you very much. How do I discharge standing caps when the leads are on the other side of the board and the traces to the caps as well? You got to find what they're connected to. One of the places that's going to be connected to, if the amp's out of standby, would be a plate connection on an output tube. Or if there's a standby switch, typically that's going to be connected to the B plus node. So if you have the amp in play and powered off, and that would typically be connected to the first B plus node, the reservoir cap, which would also be connected to the output transformer and all that. I would have to know the model beyond that, but if I had an amp where I'm like, where is it? Eventually, I would find it just by following. All right, well, the phase inverter is here, and I can tell that's this plate thing. We find where that goes to. Okay, that's kind of on the other side of this resistor is going to be the screen node, and the screen to here. Okay, that's through the choke. All right, here's where the choke comes in from the B plus. That's where I can measure all these things and discharge this stuff. Remember when you're discharging caps like that, and if amp has standby, you want to have the amp in play, not standby, because most, not all, most amps, if they're in standby, you have the reservoir node connected, but the other stuff isn't. So if you try to drain the caps, you may drain the reservoir, but not the screen, or you may drain the screen and all the preamp stuff, but not the reservoir. So make sure it's all connected if you're going to get into that stuff. Martin is celebrating being old with a red 1960 Strat into an early 60s AC30. Yeah, I remember being when Les Paul Juniors were like $400 to $500, SG Juniors, and I wish to God I bought 30 of them. Would I recommend essential tools for a non-tech to do service maintenance on their tube amps at home? Thanks. Well, first of all, you need to have a meter. You need to have a meter that auto ranges. Well, you just set it to DC, it'll measure what's the DC. Measure to AC, set it to AC, it'll measure the AC. And capacitance is really nice feature to have, and the ability to check diodes is really important to have. A lot of the other stuff meters can do. It's nice, but not really necessary for the beginner. The meters that I have are inexpensive. These are $20 meters, $25. And if you look at the description of any of my regular videos, I've got them listed. They're not expensive, and they do what I need them to do. And I've got like 6 of them. Those are the 2 that are on the bench right now. You need to have a good selection of screwdrivers, and in different sizes, and to know what size something is. So that's a number 2. That's a number 3. That's a number 1. You need to have a wide selection of, like, not all the time, but it's nice to have a selection of, like, different bits that fit different screw heads. Like, here's my Robersons for the Canadian things. Here's my star bits. Here's, you can spend $10 and get a starter set of that kind of stuff. You really need to have a good soldering station. You don't have to have a good soldering station. You can do it with just a pencil, but if you're going to do this seriously, you want to have more control. So I would look at like the Hacko FX 888 or whatever it's called for like $120. You need to have a wooden chopstick of some sort, or plastic, it's something non-conductive that you can poke around with. Most important thing is to know what to do with those tools. And I would, isopropyl alcohol, I use that all the damn time. Paper towels. But knowing what you're doing is what takes the most time. So I would say the engineer solder sucker is the only solder sucker worth buying on the market. They're like $20-$30. Desoldering braid is great to have, and I've got what I use listed in the videos as well, because other desoldering braid sucks, but it's like $10 a roll. So I'm not sure how much you need or how often you'd be doing this, but that'd be a place to start. And now we are at and the kookaburras have started going crazy. Dawn is approaching. And we're right to the end of the last intermission, and it's time to start the next intermission. So let's scroll down to the next question. Is the horn section good? Yeah, the horn section that was playing Soulfinger was quite good, Matambale, but they were not. They were playing too fast. This. I think certain songs, there's a max tempo they should be, and I don't think Soulfinger should be bum ba dum bum 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 ba dum bum 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 bum. It should be da da dum bum 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 ba dum bum bum. It's got more grease to it, but still cool that it's happening. I like a little more grease in my Soulfinger. On that note, see you guys in 7 minutes. Sorry. I was looking at the time on my phone and I forgot that it's like 30 seconds off. Let's see. I'm trying to speed round through a little bit. What do I think of Rivera quality? And got a Princeton 1 ohm when I need to use extra speaker settings. Princeton's got internal 8 ohms, so if you use something else, use another 8 ohm load. Princeton can handle a 4 ohm mismatch, so 8 and 8, 4. Riveras are fine. I'm not a big fan of some of the creative choices. I'm not a fan of some of the sound choices, but if you like the way they sound, they are built really well. Don't think I've had any experience with valve train amps unless that's the same thing as the Hayseed. If it's the same thing as the Hayseed, those were absolute garbage. But if I'm misremembering, then ignore that. I don't want to say anything bad about valve train undeserved. It's been a while since the Hayseed was the darling of the internet, but they're really built horribly. Let's see. Matt on the water. A fire in the sky. I would love to work on your 66 Princeton reverb. Send me an email at info@psionicaudio.com. It's, there. Where's there it is. info@that.com. And I'll look for that. I'd love to. I like 66 Princeton reverbs. I like Princeton reverbs a lot. Got a Pro Junior from 94 that hums with no input and volume down. Swap tubes, no change. Added 22 microfarad in parallel with each filter cap, no change. Checked all grounds. All hum disappears when the phase inverter tube is removed. Well, that doesn't mean that much by itself. You could have a problem in lots of places. If I had that amp, I would, first of all, I would actually decline to work on that amp because a Pro Junior is not worth the amount of work necessary to make it work. But if you're doing it yourself and you're not charging yourself, replace every electrolytic in the amp, triple check every solder joint on the back of the board because those solder joints break at the input jack, at all the pots. That's probably your problem. You could have a bad pot somewhere. And I believe that they use 1N4006 diodes for the rectifier. Change those all out for 1N4007s. On the Pro Junior and the Blues Junior, the 1N4006s occasionally go bad, and you get mystery hums like that. But you would have more ripple if that's the case. Sounds like if you're scoping a Pro Junior, you're qualified to work on it. But parallel caps don't always help with anything. You could have a shorted main cap, in which case paralleling won't do anything. You just don't have filtering on that node. That might be what's going on. So change out all the electrolytics. Change the diodes, triple check all the solder joints on the back of the board. Odds are it'll work at that point because there's not too much to that amp. The trouble is what there is plastic. A Vibro King for 900 pounds. That's about 800 pounds overpriced. The Vibro Kings and the Tone Kings, Fender made, are just garbage. All the Zinke era Fenders are terrible. If you open them up, underneath the outside with the Tolex and the big price tags, typically, you find that every single pot is a dual gang 500K linear, and they'll wire them in parallel or whatever to get different values. They just cheaped out on everything, and they've got crazy, insane ground schemes with really heavy-duty, crazy, thick wire, creating ground loops, just garbage. And the Vibro Kings, the input impedance of the where the guitar input is on the rear after the reverb was done wrong, and the way the jacks shunt and normal is done wrong. So it doesn't sound like a super reverb channel. It doesn't sound like a Fender reverb unit. It sounds like someone had seen vague pictures of the schematics and just kind of vaguely put them together without any knowledge of how amps work, and that's what they sound like. But they cost so much, and at the time that they came out, Fender had advertised so much in all the guitar magazines that, of course, they got editors' picks and all that fun stuff. So you get a very expensive amp that everyone raves about because they took out 4-color ad spreads for 6 months. Avoid Zinke era Fenders, Tone King and all that stuff, and Vibro King. Any recommendation for a current production J2M45? Yeah, Germino. Germino makes the best J2M45 replicas on the market. I've got a couple of videos up on the channel on the Jumino, and they're really great. And that's if I wanted a J-Tune 45, I mean, I would build one myself. Most people can't. Go see what Greg's got. He's got a couple different variations, and he can do master volumes. He can do an effects loop, but don't. You don't need it. Master volume's a nice thing for those things. He also has some really nice 50 watters. Hey, Nella. Yeah, the Friedman gain thing, that pop is fine. It's normal. I don't remember. I've not had the little sister in. It might be a way to change that, but it is normal and won't hurt a thing. Some things pop. I've got a pentode triode switch I added to that little GA40 clone of Keith Williams, and when you go pentode triode, it pops. And there's nothing you can do about that, but it doesn't hurt anything. If it bothers you, do all the amps off or in standby, or actually it doesn't have standby anymore, but just turn the master down, switch it, and turn the master back up. Doc, it hurts when I do this. My rationale was the Vox Heritage went to market. It popped when you switched that. The 65 amps that had the same kind of circuit popped when you did that. So it's all right if the one I sent out pops when you do that one thing. Thank you for that. The lighting and sound on my videos, I'm really, really working on this. It's important to me, and it has become another passion of mine doing this. And I'm really happy with my skin tone right now on this live stream. To get good skin tone, to get color separation, background separation without this big fake background deep blur, fake bokeh thing, and to have good audio and really good internet connection. I feel like I'm winning. The rest of my life is total chaos, but I've got this little thing happening, and that makes me feel like I have a little bit of control. Let's see. Zygote, you don't know about punk and hardcore gigs. You do modern stuff. People trying to sound like they did back when I was at those clubs. And yeah, I know. Sunday. I can do all that. I'm just saying that if you hold the mic here, unless you're going for the megaphone effect, if you want to do some hardcore Rudy Valley, just don't cup the back, because 57 needs to have those air vents open for the cardioid to work. You're also going to get negative. You're going to get feedback on stage if you grab it like that. So if any punk or would-be punk singers are watching, you just learned something. The more you know. Wish I was in Tijuana. Hey, Ray Laraquente. I talked about the Panaverb earlier. I think it is hideous, but I don't know whether, and overpriced, but I don't know whether it's any good until I see inside one. And none of the reviewers are going to show the insides of those, because that's not what reviewers on YouTube do. Let's see. Kicking back with an ale. Nice. I miss cask ale. Last week, someone was asking in the chat, I saw afterwards, I didn't get a chance to answer, what was the best cask ale I had, or the best ale I had when I was in England, and it was London Pride. But I'd like to do a larger sample size to make sure of my claim. I also liked Doom Bar quite a bit. Did I know that Richie Blackmore got Marshall to put Vox cuts into his Marshalls in the early days? I did not know that, and I don't actually believe that. They might have told him that just to get him to go away. There's a lot of hazy memories from that time, and hazy understanding of the world at that time back then. Tweeters and horns. Why do I suppose the Pro Reverb and Vibrolux didn't catch on quite like the Deluxe Reverb and Princeton Reverb? Dual speaker, too loud? Well, I think they did. I think they were very successful when they were just came out in the 60s, because they were louder and bigger, but not as expensive or as loud or as big as a twin, or even a super reverb. The Pro Reverb's pretty close. These days, with the need to have lower stage volumes and people wanting to be able to do one-hand carry and have something that fits in their car, the Deluxe Reverb and Princeton Reverb are most people's ideal amp. But I think the Vibrolux is the best sounding of that list. I think the Vibrolux and the Super Reverb are the best of the best sounding variants of all the 60s Fenders. But that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with a Deluxe or a Princeton. The Pros, if the Pro had been a one speaker, if it had been 40 watt 1x12, it would have been killer even today. The trouble is, back in the 60s, it was really hard to get a single 65 watt speaker. Now it's not a problem at all. Yeah, the 2x10. Hey, Frank. Yeah, 10-inch drivers magical in the old Fenders. Frank's they're Forgotten Gear Restorations. And I can't pop it on the screen right now because I'd lose my place where I'm at. But Forgotten Gear Restorations. Frank is doing what I do. Does what Brad does. Fantastic videos. Everyone, go to his channel. Give him a like. Give him a subscribe because I said to. You won't regret it. I really like his stuff. I love being able to share good things with people. So thank you for being here, Frank. And thank you for doing good stuff. Yeah, I like the 10-inch, dual 10-inch in the Vibrolux. I like the 4 10 inches in the Super Reverb, much better than the Princeton. And a Princeton with that very small cab, the low end can't develop. You don't really get the full effect. But I do think that the 10-inch is the proper choice for a Princeton over a 12-inch, unless you go to an oversized cab. Sweetheart, would you be really, really wonderful and get me another cup of coffee?
Yes.
Not because you're a girl, but because you're a fully accredited professor and I respect you and you make better coffee than I do.
That'll do.
Thank you. She's awesome. Let's see, where was I? Let's see. Dumplings for breakfast. I can have some paizo dumplings. What I think answered that already. Good, Scott. I'm glad you like the EC803S. I think the tongue saws, the gold pen, but if you like the difference, you like the difference. That's great. Gold pins aren't necessary in guitar amps. It doesn't do anything good for you. Let's see here. Picked up a 68 Blackline twin reverb for $685. Very nice. Tremolo is it original? Tremolo isn't working, but I'm getting the ticking. Change tubes. Still no luck. Next stop, rebuild the trem circuit. The three things that happen most in any Fender with the Opto Tremolo. The cathode bypass caps wear out. Need to be changed. If those cathode bypass caps are weak, the tremolo is not going to have enough strength to drive for the LFO to start working, or the 3 caps in the LFO. If it's an original, then you're going to have those 3 ceramic discs. Those things go bad, and the LFO goes out the window. And at the end of that, it's not very uncommon for the LDR and the Roach to be bad. So I imagine you replace a cathode bypass cap. Thank you, love. Yes. The 3 caps in the tremolo, which is 20, 10, 10 in stock form, and maybe the Roach, you should be good at that point. Rarely you'll have a problem with a pot. Raw Power was an AC30. I have an AC30 video on here somewhere where I did some stooges on it. I know it's a shock to some people that I do that world as well, but Hey, DIJ. By the way, thanks for helping 5 Watt World with the sound. His last post audio was more gooder. That was my goal. I like to make the world more gooder. And, in my own quiet way, I like to make the world a louder place. Stepped on my own punchline. But yeah, I was very honored to be able to help Keith with that. Keith knows what he knows, and I know what I know. And what I know is audio. And he is on the path. Sorry, I got tubes trying to roll everywhere on my desk. Stop that. And and he is on the path to getting really consistent, good sound. And if I listen to his last live stream, and he is one plug-in away from having what I would consider truly excellent live sound, and he knows that. He's got a little background fan noise we're going to get rid of. And in fact, if you listen to his last live stream, his live sound sounded better and more natural, to me at least, to real speakers. These Yamaha HS7s, which are pretty accurate, than his pre-recorded video sound. So that's next on our list. But I was glad to do that. Then if I can fix Rick Beato's hair, I will have really accomplished something. All my guitar legends are playing Fender Deluxe kind of sound. Well, there you go. Get a Deluxe Reverb. You can get a standard Fender Deluxe Reverb 65. The 65-ish. Do not get the 68. They're garbage. Get the 65. That's going to come with either the custom-made for Fender by Eminent speaker, which is terrible, or the Jensen C12K, which is also terrible. You change out either of those speakers for a good sounding speaker. And there's a ton of good sounding speakers out there, none of which ship in the damn amp for some reason. And that's a phenomenal amp. And, can have someone do $200 to $300 worth of work to make it really fantastic. I've shown how to do that in a lot of videos. Not just to change the sound, but just bring the noise level down and make it not catch on fire 5 years from now. You've got a really nice amp. You used to be able to get them used for like $600. Now I think they're closer to like $1,000 used. But they're, I'd rather everyone here go out and buy a used Fender Deluxe Reverb 65 reissue than to go buy a new one, because I don't think Fender needs to have the sales until they fix their products better. But used, it's a very good proposition. Fender doesn't make any money, and you don't have to pay anything extra because you're going to have it fixed. Speaking of better sounding speakers than the C12K, BC Electronics has got set up an ET65 and Veteran 30. Those are both WGS speakers. Same ones I have in my black 2x12 that you hear in most of my videos. So the mic's almost always on the ET65. But as a curiosity, I'm interested in trying a creamback of some sort with ET65. Thoughts on the difference it would make. I have not compared the ET65 with the Creamback 75. I have compared it with the Creamback 65, and they sound slightly different. But it's a kind of difference where if I were to record them and then play them for you, you would not reliably be able to say which one was which. You'd hear that they're slightly different, but they're very, very similar. Much more similar than the Veteran 30 is to the ET65. You might like it better. You might like it slightly differently. I think the Creamback and the ET65 are my two desert island speakers. If I had electricity on said island, you have to. So I think they're very similar speakers. And if you like the ET65, you'd love the Creamback. But if you have the ET65, do you need the Creamback, and vice versa? But I've not tried the Creamback 75 or the 90 next to it. Jay, if I'm just using my DSL 20CR as a power amp speaker, do I need to have preamp tubes / phase inverter tube? You do need to have the phase inverter tube in place. I don't think you need to have the preamp tubes in place, but it won't do any harm to have them in place, and probably better for a DSL 20R that you leave them in place, because the very act of removing them and replacing the preamp tubes can damage the not very great. Sorry, I got a weird thing on the desk. Preamp sockets in that thing. The sockets are not fantastic in that model, so I'd avoid unnecessary wear and tear and just leave the preamp tubes in. They're going to be bypassed, and it does no harm to have them there. But technically, you could remove all the preamp tubes except, the phase inverter tube, and you'd be able to use it as a power amp speaker. I'm playing a stereo rig, Blues Junior HT20, and I don't know if I'm in phase or not. Well, if you play a chord and it sounds thin, you're out of phase. You may not know, On the Blues Junior, it's pretty easy to reverse the speaker leads. You can reverse the leads on the speaker and play both amps together to see which one you like the sound of better. That'll reverse the phase of the Blues Junior very easily. You're gonna hear one combination is going to sound better to the other. It's going to be fuller, more lows. That's the one that's in phase. The issue that people run into is if you have, why is it rocking back and forth? Sorry, just got a stray creaking noise I've never had before. If you have two amps at once and you get them all in phase, some amps when you go to a different gain channel, it'll invert the signal. Everything's great. I'm on my clean channel, my clean amp. And then on one amp, I go to the dirty channel, and all of a sudden, the two amps are out of phase. That's when you want to go nuts, because if it's just one more gain stage, 12x7 gain stages are inverting. So you were in phase till you changed channels. Now you're not in phase anymore. Stereo rigs aren't really necessary. I know it's very trendy. Everyone wants stereo rigs. I've got an amp right there in this room. It is a mono amplifier run into two speakers. And when I sit here and I listen to it, do I hear it in mono? No, I don't hear it in mono because I have two ears at work. I'm hearing it in stereo and I'm placing it over there. If I'm playing here, it is clearly to the right. If I'm playing here, it's right in front of me, but I'm hearing reflections. If I'm playing here, it's clearly to the left, but I'm hearing reflections. A mono source is heard in stereo by our stereo ears. Unless your audience is all in the club with headphones on, with absolute no bleed out from that rest of the world, it doesn't matter. Stereo is bullshit for live and just adds all kinds of complications. Use mono, and blending amps live on stage, unless you got a big budget, it's probably just an unnecessary complication. Said the old guy shouting at clouds. Let's see, talking about blues lawyers and Jack White, and I did not forget your super chat, Clayburr P, and I appreciate the super chat. Permanent waves. Now, I don't think we're going to have time to get into the Rush talk, but I'm always ready to talk about Rush and Beatles and stuff. Maybe we need to recruit Neil Zlozower to critique my camera work. I think my camera work is just now getting to the point where it could hold up to any kind of critique. I have learned so much, and I think I've just gotten to a point where I'm really beginning to get a real good handle on colors. I'm red-green colorblind, so this has been tricky for me. And skin tones and color balance is tricky. This is not the best image here because I don't have a light on that red curtain, so it's not going. If that were going red, if I were to change the color temperature of a light back there, that gray wall will go with blue-gray right now. Everything would look even better, but I didn't want to turn on a bunch of other stuff. But when you see the next playing video, I've found a way to get that wall there, that gray wall, to look really good while still having natural skin tones in front of it. It's been very tricky. Though in theory, I should come over here and obey the rule of thirds. But I can't see the screen as well over here, so I'm back here in the boring old middle. Your SG61 SG video, does that wiring do the same as 50s with the cap going from one? Yeah, it's 50s wiring. All 50s wiring is having the tone circuit connected to the wiper of the volume pot rather than the input of the volume pot. It doesn't matter if that tone circuit is wire from the wiper going to a pot, which then goes through a cap to ground, or whether that wiper is going through a cap and then through the pot, a resistor to ground. There are places where it matters where it's cap, then resistor, or resistor, then cap. As I talked about in that GA40 video where it's high voltage DC, you want to have that cap first to block that. In a guitar, it doesn't matter. I don't need the backlight. Well, the backlight is just on the wall. It's just I can make that go up, but I didn't turn the backlight on. I've got one that I can throw on that curtain to make the curtain go a nicer red, and I have not done that today. I do have a little bit of a rim light from the overhead, which is turned down right now, but it's there. These things matter. If I were to turn that up, for those 4 of you who care about such things, let's see if this maintained its connection. These small rig lights are fantastic, but the small rig app is not so much. That's my overhead light. You can see how white my hair is now, but everything else is getting more colorful. If I turn that back down, I can make it dark. Ooh. So I had it about right there, I guess. Close enough. This is not a critical thing, but I'm very pleased with my skin tones and that I'm not in a weird space. Sorry, from SG wiring to lights. My reverb is sounding increasingly feeble on the Deluxe Reverb reissue, probably tube issues. Thanks, I'm digging the WGS ET65. It could be a tube, but it's either going to be the driver tube, the 12AT7, or it's going to be the tank. Reverb tanks suck, and the Belton that comes in the Deluxe Reverb reissue is the worst one on the market. You're in Portugal, or Vinicius, I apologize. I have 2 Portuguese-speaking friends on here. One of you is in Portugal, one of you is in Brazil, and I don't recall. I think you're in Brazil. Is that correct, Vinicius? Sorry. I don't know whether shipping is going to be a deal breaker. MOD, medium decay, is quite good. My preference is the Mojo Tone medium decay, which is made in the same factory but a slightly different spec. But I don't know which is available to you more inexpensive or less expensively. But it's going to be either the 12AT7 or the tank. 90% of the time. That's a non-scientific number I just chose, but it's probably pretty close to accurate. Sent to me says, I noticed when doing mods on the Deluxe Reverb reissue for the Marshall type sound, which is not something you're going to get from Deluxe Reverb, change the caps in the tone stack for the normal channel, but the mids pot's wired to 1 meg bass pot vibrato channel. I don't know what you're asking. First of all, are you talking about my mods? I don't do a Marshall mod for those because you're not going to get you're not yet. Pipotherium, yes, the thumbnails from the courtyard at the Bodleian Library in Oxford. Thank you for noticing that. I am adding a mids pot in place of the 6.8K resistor that usually goes from the bass pot to ground. I'm just doing a mids pot wired as a series resistor there. So I think that's what you're asking. But I'm not doing a Marshall-y sound on that thing. When I make a change to the normal channel, I'm typically, if I make any changes to the normal channel on a Deluxe Reverb, I just change the mids cap from a 47 nanofarad to a 22 nanofarad, which then makes that be the normal channel from a Super Reverb. So it's slightly different, has more lower mids than the otherwise similar sounding reverb channel. It gives you 2 more distinct channels at the price of changing 1 cap. And the mids pot I add is just in place of that 6.8K resistor. Of course, that's how his name should be pronounced. Mr. Pert. Brother built you coffee's catching up to me. A beautiful cab with a 12-inch Texas heat speaker. It is not a flavor that I would find useful, but I've got some player friends in town and clients who do more of a twangy, telly showcase kind of thing where they're not playing rhythm. They don't ever need to have a big, full, clean sound. It's all an aggressive kind of Speedy West meets. I don't know. It's a telly slinger kind of thing, and the Texas Heat works great for them. It's very mid-range focused, but I just don't like the low end on them as much. But it is cab dependent. Hopefully yours sounds fantastic. Thank you so much, sent to me. I hope I was able to answer your question. If you have if you need clarification, please ask. Yeah, medium decay, Wes, is the way to go. Brad's already got you taken care of. Let's see. Thank you, Nella. Cheers. Let's see. Trying to play catch up here, and I'm never going to catch up entirely. We got 25 minutes. Let me see what I can do. If I skip any questions, it's because I'm scrolling and you didn't put a question mark in front of your question, so I don't see it. That's what, at least I'll say that. T777, yeah, the AC-15C1, if it sounds good to you, it's awesome. Hey, the Mr. Quav, I do want to revisit that series. It's just been so hard because the prices have been going all over the place in the last 2 years. It's so every time I start to get it ready, the prices of everything change. But I do need to finish that. Let's see. Hey, David Comegis. I've not talked about the scope too much. It's a. I've got the model number listed in the description of all my videos, and I show it in a few videos, but it's usually not anything that exciting. I'm like, yep, I'm getting 21.5 watts out of this deluxe reverb output. It's just, so it doesn't make a lot of videos. And when it does make a video, I try to make sure that I'm not being like, and now if we transmogrify the dimorphology, but I just don't want it to be a bunch of gobbledygook. So it's a tough thing to communicate how to use a scope to, the channel's not aimed at other techs. The channel's aimed at guitar players for the most part. So I try to not dumb things down, but find where technicians and musicians have a common vocabulary and bring everything to that as much as possible. So talking about scopes is, there are a lot of channels out there that do all that kind of stuff, and they do a great job on that, but that's not my aim here. Of course, the last video I put up on the scope, I had the scope set wrong. So there was like a 3-volt offset between the two different probes. Because I was looking at it from behind a camera, so I couldn't see the fine fucking print. I need to be one of those men with, the flip down magnifying things. I'm going to start looking like the guy from the opening scene of Brazil, which is a fantastic movie. Let's see. Well, thank you, Fletches40, but don't waste your money on Epiphone amps. They're garbage. Sorry. I'm not trying to shit on you, but no, they're not something to spend money on. Money's too important to spend on Epiphone amps. Let's see. Just Dave, you're asking about lacquer thinner, and I saw this during the last break. Brad already answered that very well. Yeah, stick with IPA. It's cheap and it does the job, and you don't even have to use 100%. You can just get the 91% from the drugstore. And don't use brake cleaner fluid either, unless you absolutely must, and you know what. Isopropyl alcohol, six string codger, not Indian pale ales. Yeah, IPA is what hipsters drink when other hipsters are watching. Yeah, I'm not a hipster. I don't drink that nasty shit. But the brake, I have had to use brake cleaner fluid on some stuff, but you have to be very careful with other plastics, and you don't want to have that inside or have any runoff from that stuff. Just stick with the isopropyl. It won't hurt you, won't hurt anything really. It can only help, and it's self-cleaning. Brand new 65 Deluxe Reverb reissue. Can we talk about them? I've talked about Deluxe Reverbs a lot in this stream already, and I don't mean to be mean to you, Rojas, but I'm trying to get to the end. I'd love to have you do all the things you do in my Deluxe. Well, I hope eventually I will be taking more work. I'm still getting a bunch of stuff out before I take new stuff in for the most part, because I'm just one guy. One of the reasons I put those videos up on the Deluxe Reverb reissues is that I cannot work on every amp in the world, but you can take them to another tech and very respectfully say, hey, I saw this video. I thought it was interesting. Would you mind taking a look? Don't go to another tech and say, hey, this guy on the internet says you need to do this, because that won't work. But if you approach it respectfully, say, hey, I'm really interested in having this done, and this guy has a real good explanation. And if you do it that way, and the tech actually has an open mind and looks at it and say, okay, yeah, I'm just moving the stuff that gets hot off the PCB. Okay, this trace is bad. We'll cut that trace, replace it with a shielded run. That all makes sense. Have I ever seen an amp come in with a fault that actually made it sound better? Fault, yeah. There are examples of amplifiers from old 56 Deluxes to AC30s and stuff where the resistors have drifted in such a way that there was a particularly good sound, where something that used to be 47K was actually, something that was actually 56, started as 56K was actually closer to 47K, or something that was started off life as 220K was actually 330K. And I have a notebook of those particularly great sounding accidents just from component drifts. Because if that sounds great with a 330K there, it might have been 327K, and it wasn't that originally. You can replicate that in a similar amp by putting a 330K there. So I've got a little booklet of little tricks like that. But there are also most faults just cause issue, but they're happy accidents, and it's nice to know these things. They're the Reaper, sorry. Capitalization matters. The Reaper, that's how we get analverpists. The Reaper 987 took my advice and traded in the Origin for a DSL-40 CR and loving it. Thanks for the tip. I'm very glad that worked for you. Congratulations. The Reaper. Very tricky one to read. It's a foot away. Let me move it here. Could do cooking shows. I thought about that, but the lighting in the kitchen is terrible, and I can't. I don't want to have a chance of any hot cooking oil spattering on these lights. You guys are just so kind. I'm just so gorgeous. I'm just so gorgeous. I do look a lot better in this lighting, and if I really want to look good. It's funny how faces change. This is 75 millimeters, and our back here it look a certain way. This is closer to 50. This is more how our eyes actually see things. And all this stuff is fun to learn about. Let me move that back. But I got big hands. I got big YouTube hands. Let's see. Yeah, the 18Bs is $18.99 at Amazon right now. I mean, if you're just starting out, just get one of those. There are so many better meters than that, but you don't need to have a $200 meter to do the basic stuff. I'd rather have a whole bunch of $20 meters, be able to do 4 or 5 things at once, and have one really expensive meter that I cannot drop, and I can only do one thing at a time. And I've had expensive meters that failed, and then I'm like, well, this thing works fine for what I do. The probes, cheap meter, good probes, happy tech. Especially if you have multiple cheap meters that work with good probes, which is what I've done. Not a guru. Yeah, I discussed the pano verb at the beginning, or towards the beginning of the chat. I don't want to go back to it. Is it even worth owning a tube amp if I don't have access to a reputable repair guy? I'm not sure, man. That's a tricky question. It depends on where you live. And I'm the wrong person to ask because that's how I got into this. I needed stuff done that I couldn't afford to have anyone do, so I just started learning how to do it. That doesn't work for everyone for some reason. But the modeling stuff is getting great, and if that kind of approach works for you, there's nothing wrong with that either. I'm not tubes over digital. I'm certainly not digital over tubes, but these are all tools that can make music. And at the end of the day, you don't need tubes or digital, You just need something that inspires you. Not bad for sitting, new strings sitting about an hour and played. Bone compensated saddle for the win. Let's see. Thank you, John. Appreciate that. Let's see. If someone says old famous rocker loves and plays them, just remember they're all deaf now. Yeah, sadly, that's true. Yes, the mighty status quo. Yeah, that's a lot of AC30s with the mighty quo. Let's see. I watched a Forgotten Gear Restorations video today and immediately subscribed. Well, see, I was right. Yeah. Let's see what Frank had to say to me. The troublesome would get good at this stuff and end up looking like me. I robbed them of that split title intro, too. My plan is working. Let's see. Do I have another technically, where did it go? Yeah, technical issues or technical difficulties. Yeah, I have not done that since last December because I got so busy, all kinds of crazy stuff. And I had all these plans. I had people lined up, and I'm going to get back on that. I also watched back at them, and I need to get Dave Freeman back at some point and just apologize. I was so bad at it on that first one I did with him. And part of it's the lag. When you're doing this, there's like just enough of a timing difference between when someone says something, when you hear it, that throws everything off. And I ended up interrupting him too much, and I felt bad about that. And then I got to the point after I did the thing with Ted Woodford where I felt like I was trying too hard to make something happen, and that I was chasing being a YouTuber too much. And I was like, just damp that back and go back to the amps. So I need to do more of it because it's a good premise, but I just don't want it to be the YouTube thing. I want it to be the amp or the information thing. I don't know. It's a balance. We do this thing where we put ourselves out here and we're like, hey, everyone, look at me. And then we get all vulnerable about it and don't look at me. It's just one of those things. So I need to revisit it. And I can sit down and come up with a 6-month plan, and then something comes up and, oh no, I had that transformer I couldn't get for three months, and it's tricky at that point. Everything goes sideways. But thank you, Travis, for asking. I do want to revisit that. Let's see. Speaker suggestions for a Fender Champ. There aren't any great 8-inch speakers out there, Julian. I'm sorry. You can get the ones that suck the least. The one I put in most champs that come in is there's a Weber Alnico for the very old stuff, and there's a WGS G8C and a G8A, which are both very good, but they're all very good for an 8-inch speaker. And 8-inch speakers range from the absolute terrible to the meh. 8-inch speakers don't sound great, and it doesn't matter how close you put the mic. People are like, blah, 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 blah. 10-inch speakers are where it's at. 8-inch speakers, Jacob, I'm not making fun of Rick Beato's hair. I'm saying that in his live stream, his hair looks like he's in The Incredibles. It's too crisp. His hair is very, very crisp and a little unnatural. And I'd tell him that if he were here. I'm not talking about him behind his back. And he's certainly not talking about me at all, grand scheme of things. But if I had his money, I would have a director of photography. Let's see. Hey, Scott Pickett. He's going to be in Memphis the first weekend in October. Any suggestions what music stores or music venues to check out? Also food spots. Yeah. Music stores, you only need to know one. Martin Music on Poplar at Evergreen. Martin Music, phenomenal music store. What you want when you find a local music store, they've got a wide range of really, really nice stuff. Great staff, great people. They know what they're talking about, and it's fun. You can go in and you can actually play things. And if you have questions, they know the answer. They don't have to ask their manager or look something up. Music venues to check out. It depends on who's playing. Lafayette's is a nice place over in Overton Square with food and drink and really great bands most of the time. I don't know what music you're into or what your kinds of scenes are. Food spots, so many. Man, on another chat, we can do a whole list. And I don't want to go off on my list of great places and you're like, well, I'm a vegan. In which case, Memphis ain't for you. But if just in a nutshell, if you go to Alcinia's and the barbecue shop and Gus's, you're going home happy. Yeah, the the 68 reissues is just a noisy piece of garbage. Yeah. Avoid the 68 reissues. It takes someone like me an hour and a half to make them back to what they should have been to begin with. Why do I suppose Zappa liked to record with a pig nose? I think it was partially a perversity that I think he liked the idea that I'm going to slam this cheap mic, probably some Altec thing, right up on this cheap amp and get this massive sound. Part of it is because the pig nose distorted more than the real amps at the time did at a much lower volume. And it distorts in a different way. The pig nose sound, as awful as it is on one hand, kind of leads to the Rockman sound if you look at how clipping and saturation circuits work. And I don't, people love to do videos on YouTube. Hey, I got one of those old Rockman. But I remember back in the day when Rockman was a going concern, and you get one, you're like, man, this doesn't sound anything like that ZZ Top record, or this doesn't sound anything like Pyromania or Hysteria, because that was just a small piece of the puzzle. And if you listen to it, it actually doesn't sound that great. It was just the first time you had a little black box you could plug into and listen to yourself in headphones. And, I think the same thing could be said for Zappa as could be said for the guys in Def Leppard or the, Tom in Boston or Billy Gibbons. Yeah, the piece of gear was used, but it was also incidental. That not in Tom's case with Boston, it was more than incidental. He designed the damn thing specifically, but it's not a really good sounding thing. It just does a particular thing, and really great players used it for a short period of time. We are 5 minutes away from the end. I'm going to make sure I've not missed any super chats. Not that the rest of you aren't important to me. Sent to me. That's 2 super chats. Did you mean to do 2 super chats? I appreciate that, but okay. It was a vid I did when I cut the trace to the V2 pot due to noise. Why wasn't the mid pot not on the normal channel? All right. When I cut the trace to the V2 pot, it's because there's noise on the board. That trace location on the PCB is noisy. So I cut the trace right there at the pot. At the tube, I removed the green wire going to that tube, and I put a shielded wire there going to the tube. So that's a separate thing from the mids pot thing. The mid pot is on the vibrato channel in that amp because that player mostly plays the vibrato channel. And by putting the mid spot on it, he can keep it at about 10 o'clock. It sounds like a stock deluxe reverb. He can turn it up above noon and begin to partially bypass the tone stack, get a more tweedy sound, more of an overdrive, and more mids, certainly. Or he can turn it to like 8, 9 o'clock and sound more like a Fender Twin, which has a 10 meg mid spot, but at 5, where most people will set a twin mid spot, it's actually about 1 to 2K, closer to 1K. And so by turning that pot down on the back of the amp, he can make his deluxe reverb sound more like a small twin, or like a deluxe reverb, put about 10 o'clock, or going towards a tweed deluxe, more what you described as a Marshally sound as you turn it up. And then I changed the cap on the normal channel just to make the normal channel have the tonal response to the normal channel of a super reverb. Most of the Fender reverb amps, aside from the Princeton, which is just one channel, both channels are the same, and they have a 100 nanofarad bass cap and a 47 nanofarad mids cap, and then a 250 picofarad treble cap. The Super Reverb is an outlier, and that had a 22 nanofarad mids cap. And if you look at the frequency response of that tone stack, it gives a lot more lower mids, a lot fuller lower mids, which really is part of the big sound of the Super Reverb. Also the speakers, but it makes the normal channel of the Deluxe Reverb a little more, just stands out more from the vibrato channel, because especially once you take that bright cap off the vibrato channel, the reverb channel, it doesn't sound all that different from the normal channel. So this just gives a little bit more. Brazil is my favorite De Niro role. I think that and Raging Bull, but yeah, I do like him as Henry Tuttle, or Tuttle, a heating engineer. I love Brazil, and we all need more transmogrification. Everyone needs to transmogrify from the norm. Going back to the Rush earlier. Let's see. I am familiar with the Carmen Gia. Not a huge fan. I don't like the Zobel network on the output. Other than that, it's a nice amp, but I think it's a little muted as a result. AC30s sound great in the last 6 months before they die. Well, in my experience, they don't die, or if they do, I bring them back from the dead quite happily. Joy of painting, no. Have I ever been electrocuted, and how did it happen? I get electrocuted from time to time. Mostly, if I have a Fender chassis on the bench, and I forget to turn off the variac that it's plugged into, or I forget to unplug it, and I'll be reaching in here, and my hand or my arm typically will brush against the AC connections on the power switch. That's the most common way I get. That's about the only way I ever really get zapped, and it's unpleasant, but it's so far, touch wood, I ain't dead yet. But what happens more often than that is I'll be working on an amp, and my arm hair will get caught on a edge of a chassis or a crack in a chassis or whatever, and just that moment that I'm feeling the arm hair being pulled, for that moment, it's the big one. Just that moment of, because I'm so paranoid about it. Because I am paranoid about it, that's about the only zap I ever get. Once, maybe more than once, but there'd be a cap that had stored voltage that I never expected it to store voltage. That's been a while since that happened, and I'm pretty good about it. The worst was when I was showing someone how unsafe it was that this very old, like 66 Marshall, had exposed connections on its power transformer, output transformer. I'm like, don't ever touch here because you'll get zapped, because those are live connections. That's illegal to sell these days. And I was testing the amp, and I needed to make sure the speaker cable was plugged in. I reached over it, and I brushed my arm against that primary connection right in front of the people that I just said, never do this, it's dangerous. I was awake, Speaking of that, let me make sure I've got all the super chats. Thank you, Mr. Scott Pickett. Appreciate that. Everyone have a great weekend. Have a great day. I've got a video on this twin coming out soon, and I'll try not to electrocute myself. And I've got a video coming out about the making of that video. And then maybe I'll do a video about the making of the video about the making of the video. So where does it end? It ends right here. Everyone, thank you so much for being here. Have a good day.